Welcome to the Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC 277, Pena versus Nunes 2. I'm your host, Ben Duffy of Sherdog.com, and with me, as always, is Keith Schillen, the executive producer of the Sherdog Radio Network. Keith, how are you doing today?
I'm great, man. Pay-per-view week. I'm always excited about that. We got a lot of exciting fights. So, yeah, I'm excited, man. How you doing?
I'm doing really well. As of right now, when we're recording this, it is less than 24 hours, a little over 24 hours from when we were doing the recap for UFC Fight Night Blades versus Aspinall, UFC London. I can't wait to talk about this card and wash the taste of that out of my mouth because, as we said on the recap, it was a pretty rough card. The undercard of that thing was terrible. There were some fun things on the main card, mostly due to Patty and Molly. And then the main event can only be described as a tragedy. Possibly career-altering injury and a 15-second fight.
Yeah, if the main event of this card ends in an injury and it's 3 fights in a row, we got to do something different. We have to try to break the streak. We have to Ben wants to shave his head or something to try to get please the MMA gods. If we
we need an exorcist or something. If we get that 3 weeks in a row, I don't know. This one, the UFC is back on the road. This one is not taking place at their de facto pay-per-view home of the T-Mobile Center in Vegas. This one is in Dallas. It's in my state. It's up at is it United Center at the Dallas that the Mavericks play in. It's whatever the big arena is in Dallas. Okay. It's a Dallas card. It's as basically every UFC pay-per-view these days has a title fight at the top. It of course has the bantamweight title rematch between Julianna Pena and Amanda Nunes. Rematching one of the biggest upsets in UFC history. South of that, it's got a bunch of good stuff. It has some local service for the fans. I mean, it has Texas's most popular fighter. It has Derrick Lewis. I'm going to throw something at you here. It's been suggested to us a couple of times by Sherdog associate editor Jay Petrie. I always forget to do it. We're going to do it this time. When we do the recaps, we always give the card a letter grade as the very last thing. And we, as you point out, we grade it on a curve. There are different expectations of a free fight night card than of something that you're shelling out $75 for. But let's give this card a letter grade in advance, based on what it is on paper, based on your expectations of it. Give this card a letter grade, and we'll compare.
As you said, grade it on the curve. Grade it on the curve. Yeah, pay-per-view. I think if I was a fan and I was living in Dallas and they announced UFC is coming to Dallas, it's going to be a pay-per-view. I'm excited. This is a fight that's going to be pay-per-view. What am I getting? I know I'm getting Derrick Lewis, but what am I going to get as a title shot in the main event? I'm getting as Amanda Nunes, Julianna Pena. I'm a little disappointed. I would much rather have that be the co-main event. I understand sometimes it's just timing. Certain champions are out. Obviously, I know Usman's injured right now. Francis Ngannou's injured. I don't know who else, but a couple situations don't happen, so you get this as a main event. I'm much more excited for this main event as I was the last time they fought.
Oh, yeah.
I think everybody can say that. I give it a C. It's lacking. It's pretty competitive. If you look down the card, there's 7 or 8 fights I'm pretty intrigued in. But there's maybe one prospect I really like on the prelims. There isn't a star. You're not going to have a moment at the press conference unless Derrick Lewis says something really funny comedy stick of Derrick Lewis, but you don't have the big name. I don't know. I'd see.
Yeah, I'm with you here. I'm going to check it out. I'd be checking it out even if I weren't doing this professionally. If we were looking at Julianna Pena versus Amanda Nunes 1 as a headliner, this would be on paper one of the worst pay-per-views ever. Where your main event has a minus 900 favorite. It has at least one probable title eliminator. Your next flyweight title challenger is very likely to come out of this. Between the Moreno and Cara France and the Pantoja and Perez fights.
Mm-hmm. Light heavyweight title eliminator.
Yeah. Magomed Ankalaev could, or Anthony Smith could very easily be your next title challenger there. If chips fall just the right way, Lewis and Pavlovich, the winner of that could be very close, but that would require something to happen to someone else.
Sure.
It's not bad. And in terms of local fan service, the top prelim is Alex Morono, who is a Texas guy. He's a Ford guy, so he trains right there, and he's going to get a pop from the crowd. and probably going to deliver a really fun fight. It should be a real fun night of fights.
And
I'm giving it a C right now.
You got 2 flyweight bouts on the main card. So, like, everyone should be like, Keith, why just give it a C? This is what you asked for.
Well, that's exactly what I was going to say.
I was asking the women to get respect and flyweights to get respect. They get it. And I still give a C. I can't be satisfied.
But here's the thing. I'm giving it a C right now, but I strongly suspect that we'll be giving it a higher grade than that when
I agree. I hope so.
I hope so. First fight up at UFC 277 is a welterweight matchup between 2 gentlemen who got off on the wrong foot in the UFC and are going to try to prove that they still have plenty of upside. It is Orion Cosce versus Mike Blood Diamond Mathetha. Cosce, the 28-year-old from Northern California, is 7-1 overall. He's 0-1 in the UFC after joining out of the 4th season of Dana White's Contender Series. He debuted almost exactly a year ago on July 31st of last year, where he got knocked out in the 2nd round by Phil Rowe. That was at UFC on ESPN, Hall versus Strickland. He'll try to get things back on track against Blood Diamond. The Zimbabwean, by way of New Zealand, is 34 years old, just 3-1 as a mixed martial artist. He has had a lengthy kickboxing career. He lost his UFC debut at UFC 271 back in February, got choked out late in the 1st round by Jeremiah Wells. He, of course, came into the fight with considerable hype because he is a teammate and close friend of UFC middleweight champ Israel Adesanya. He as well has something to prove here. The odds are fairly close on this one, but Cosce is a slight favorite. He's minus 160. Mathetha out there around plus 135. So, Keith, these are 2 guys who both came to the UFC with a good amount of hype, deserved or not. Cosce came to the UFC with a certain amount of hype because he was 7-0, had basically blown by everybody in his path, and Blood Diamond because he has a hell of a highlight reel if you include some of his kickboxing stuff, and he's Israel Adesanya's homie. Like, he has a little bit of that same swagger to him. Not exactly the same style as a striker, but the ability to generate highlights. They both came up against problems in their UFC debuts, but Cosce's problems look more fixable to me. Cosce on his way up, and this is hindsight. I picked him to beat not Wells. I picked him to beat Phil Rowe in his debut, but I acknowledged that Cosce was fighting small shows in Northern California, and he just has so much physical horsepower that he was overwhelming everybody. When he had someone in Rowe that, okay, he was able to take him down, but he had to work for it. Rowe kept getting back up, and Cosce kept having to hit mat returns. He started to run out of gas, and he started to run out of ideas pretty quick. And by the 2nd round, Rowe was just busting him up on the feet. Thing was over late in the 2nd round. Those are fixable problems if he went back to the drawing board. Because if he can fix those, he has the physical tools. I know you like your wrestle boxers. He's a very good wrestler who, his striking runs off of that. He's definitely, he's a plus athlete. He's strong as an ox. His problems are fixable. Blood Diamond's problems aren't as fixable. He was overwhelmed on the ground by Jeremiah Wells, who is a good ground fighter. Like, he's a solid ground fighter. He's a well-rounded mixed martial artist, but he ain't Damian Maia. And once Blood Diamond hit the mat, he had no idea what to do. I don't think of him when we are in this conversation just because he only has 1 fight in the UFC, but he has as bad a ground game as anyone in the UFC. That's theoretically fixable, but at 34 and with a lengthy, 50, 70 fight career in another sport, it seems unlikely. And just based on that, Cosce is not a chinny guy. I don't see Blood Diamond just lighting him up with 1 strike. It took Rowe about 30 knees to the face to finally put Cosce down when he was already exhausted and discouraged. I think even if Cosce gets a few things he doesn't like from Blood Diamond on the feet, he's just going to bull his way into the clinch or just shoot on him, take him down, and just mash him. Give me Cosce by TKO ground and pound late in the 1st round.
Yeah, this is a really intriguing fight, especially because Blood Diamond, I think it's so weird that that's what they call him. He goes by, they didn't even say the Mike Mathetha, just Blood Diamond.
That's that privilege from being Adesanya's guy. Because if he was just some other dude, he'd have to earn that. Yeah,
shut up, dude. So Adesanya can get the Blood Diamond in the UFC Like, what's up with Alex Moreno? He can't get you in the UFC.
Oh,
he doesn't have the same pull.
We wouldn't want to see that.
No, I would.
Oh my God.
You and your family might not want to see it. The rest of us would love to see that. Yeah, the blood diamond. It's sad because he's such a mystery because there's a lot of film on him as a kickboxer. You say, listen, the only film you're going to get of him of MMA is him getting taken down and submitted really quick by Jeremiah Wells. He's a very high level kickboxer. He's obviously very technical on the feet. I like that he parries punches really well. Large arsenal of kicks, really, really hard kicks. But his grappling did not look good against a guy like Wells, who took him down, had no chance to get backed up, got submitted quickly. He was just simply overwhelmed and looked like a guy that is a kickboxer who just turned to MMA and got thrown right to the best MMA organization in the world. The one thing I would disagree on you is you saying that it would take more than one shot to put Cosce out. There's different levels of kickboxing.
Okay.
I don't know if he's Alex Pereira, but he is a world champion kickboxer. I think he could put out Cosce with one shot. But like, it's also very likely that it does take him 7, 8, 9 big shots before he puts him out. Cosce, to his credit, well, it's kind of like a double-edged sword for him because on the regional scene, his aggression was such a great thing. I mean, he's going 1,000 miles an hour, as you mentioned, just overwhelming his opponents with just aggression. But in the UFC, that's not going to work. The level is so much higher. The level of athlete is so much higher. Cosce's a southpaw. He does pack serious power in both of his hands. Every single one of his wins is by way of stoppage. He makes the mistake of pillaring. I even said it when I was doing the Contender Series previews. He like kind of hurdles up, which leaves openings to be kicked, to be ripped to the body, to be taken down. He does throw a lot of kicks. It's really good kicking game. If he gets in the clinch, he likes to battle in close quarters, dirty boxing. One thing he likes to do is press his opponent against the cage and try to like reach over the head and around and try to get like a standing guillotine. It's something he tries a lot. He's a solid wrestler. He's got not the fastest of entries or not the like most technical of entries, but they have him and his brother have this like raw strength where if they can just get their arm in the back of your leg, you're going for a ride. He does like the fat guy wrestling headlock, which I definitely don't like. He also throws a lot of suplexes on the regional scene, which will slow himself down, and that's what we saw against who was it? Rowe. Not that the suplexes, but just tiring himself out. But when he's on top, heavy ground and pound, he doesn't control himself, like and that'll have him lose position. But I've actually seen him get his back taken in the past, and his Achilles heel, as you talked about, is cardio. He was easily beating Phil Rowe until he kind of gassed out, and then Phil Rowe took over. Cosce is not a smart fighter. I could see him coming out like the Tasmanian Devil, throwing these haymakers and getting his head kicked off, like that's, or just running into a big left hook or something. But he should have such an advantage on the ground. Like Wells, I can't see him just go and get a takedown, land some heavy ground and pound. You went TKO from ground and pound. I'll say that Blood Diamond gives up his back when he's getting hit with some shots. Cosce locks on a rear naked choke. Give me Cosce by first round submission.
All right, there you have it. 2 picks for Orion Cosce to get back on track in a pretty definitive way in the opener at UFC 277. Next up, we head to the light heavyweight division for a matchup between 2 up-and-comers that, frankly, both look pretty promising. It is Nicolae Negumereanu versus Ihor Potieria. Negumereanu, the 27-year-old Romanian, is 12-1 overall. He is 3-1 in the UFC, joined the UFC and lost his debut to Saparbek Safarov. That was back in March of 2019. Missed the whole year after that, the whole first year of COVID. Came back last year, and he's won 3 straight since. Starting last June, he's beaten Alexa Kamer, Ike Villanueva, and Kennedy Nzechukwu. The most recent of those, the Nzechukwu fight, was back at UFC 272 in March. That was a split decision. He'll be taking on the debuting Potieria. 26-year-old Ukrainian is 19-2 overall. He is joining out of the 2021 season of Dana White's Contender Series, but overall, he is on a 15-fight win streak. On the Contender Series, he knocked out Lukas Sadolski in the first round, just kind of lit him up with punches on the feet, finished it on the ground. He is the slight favorite here. He is minus 155 right now. Negumereanu around plus 130 or plus 135 as the underdog. I tell you what, Keith, as much as we kind of said, this is a C-level pay-per-view card, for us to have a 26-year-old and 27-year-old light heavyweight, the second fight out of the gate with kind of this much upside, again, a debuting guy on a 15-fight win streak, a guy on a 3-fight win streak in the UFC, that's not bad. There are some pay-per-view cards that have relative junk this low on the card compared to this, but this is a hell of a fight. Who you got in this one? And in a light heavyweight division that, still wide open, if you haven't fought all these guys yet, if you're not 37 years old, it's not going to take much to break into the top 15. What kind of upside do you see for both these guys?
I don't know if that's such an interesting question. What I've seen of them, I'm not extremely high on, but as you said, based on their age, they're at a fairly, I wouldn't say super young. They're not the age where you expect huge improvements. They're not 23, 24, but they're starting to get to their prime ages. So I can see big improvements. I think I always struggle with this guy's last name, Negumereanu. He's had a lot of improvements since his first fight. He looked much better. I mean, beating Nchukwu, that's a good win. That's a very good win in his last fight, and it aged well because Nchukwu just won his last fight. Looked great. Yep. So, what I expect from this fight is I expect a lot of action. Negumereanu, Nicolae he's a brawler. He throws a lot of looping hard shots where he's trying to take people's heads off. Besides knocking out Villanueva, though, he surprisingly lacks power. I thought he would have more power. Hopefully, he's starting to reach the age where he's getting some power. So maybe some of that brawling style has started knocking guys out. He has a lot of defensive holes, though. He backs straight up. He was hurt by Safarov in their fight. He can grapple a little bit. He landed takedowns against Kamara. He landed a takedown against Nchukwu, who's obviously a massive dude, hard to get down. But he was easily taken down against Safarov in their fight. And he had no get-up game in that fight. He does have 3 submission wins, though. Move over to Potieria. This guy, as you mentioned, 26 years old, southpaw, which I like, fast hands, has some pop in his hands. He throws a lot of combinations. He'll kind of spring forward, throwing looping shots. They are kind of wild. He does make mistake of hanging his hands low. He will battle on the clinch. Not a powerful wrestler, but he does have 6 submission wins, more of a grappler than a wrestler. I've been wrong about Negumereanu before. He surprised me by beating Nchukwu, but I'm going to go the opposite. I'm going to go with a newcomer, Potieria. I think they both have very similar styles. I just think that Potieria might have the power advantage. If someone gets rocked on the feet, I think it would probably be Negumereanu. So with that, that's having me lean to the newcomer just slightly because of that. So give me. I don't think he's going to get a stoppage. I think we could have a really fun early prelim brawl. But give me Potieria by decision.
Awesome. I agree with basically your entire breakdown there. The debut of Negumereanu against Saparbek Safarov back in 2019, that was very concerning if you were trying to look at Negumereanu as a prospect, because Safarov took him down pretty easily in all 3 rounds. And as you pointed out, he didn't have much of a get-up game and really didn't even throw up a ton of submissions from his back. He wasn't exactly like Paul Craig down there. He just kind of made slow attempts to get up and got pelted. He lost kind of a lousy fight. He seems to be a different fighter since he came back in 2021, much improved. Obviously, taking out Alexa Kamer and Ike Villanueva, that's not the highest level opposition, but Kennedy and Nchukwu, that's a legit win because, we're talking about a guy that's kind of dancing around the edges of the top 15, and Negumereanu beat him. Potieria, he's on a 15-fight win streak, but a lot of those were at kind of second and third level Eastern Europe and Ukraine events. Not even we're not talking about ACA and top level, but some of those dudes that he beat are not good. This is definitely going to, like, I think Negumereanu is going to be pretty easily the best fighter that Potieria has faced, and the opposite is not true. I agree that Negumereanu doesn't have as much power as it looks like he should, because he is a burly dude who looks like he's throwing really hard. But yeah, it's been lacking. I mean, he hurt Alexa Kamer a few times, but never really in danger of finishing him. But I do think I'm picking Negumereanu here. Like, the real weakness I've seen in him, but is, his takedown defense is not great, and he doesn't have a whole lot of ideas once he gets down there. But I don't think Potieria is necessarily going to take that route. I think this is going to be mostly contested on the feet. Both guys have their shortcomings there, but Negumereanu has been in the fire against better fighters. Like, Kennedy Nzechukwu is a bigger guy and a more talented guy and a harder hitter than anyone Potieria has fought. And Negumereanu was fine except for that horrible eye poke. So give me Negumereanu in the slight upset to win a decision here, probably just winning 2 out of 3 rounds in a pretty fun one. Next up on the UFC 277 undercard is a hastily thrown together women's bantamweight matchup. It is Yeon Kim versus Joselyne Edwards. In other words, it is a woman who fought at flyweight in her last fight against a woman who fought at featherweight in her last fight. They're going to meet in the middle. Kim, the 32-year-old South Korean, is 9-5-2 overall. She's 3-5 in the UFC. She is coming off of 3 straight losses against Alexa Grasso, Molly McCann, and Priscilla Cachoeira. All 3 of them unanimous decision losses. The most recent of them, the Cachoeira loss, was at UFC Fight Night Makhachev versus Green back in February. She gets one more chance. She was on the Shillan and Duffy cut list. She was apparently not on the Shelby and Maynard cut list, and that's the one that counts. So she's going to try to get things back on track here against Edwards. Edwards, the 26-year-old Panamanian, is 11-4 overall. She is 2-2 in the UFC. She is coming off a win. She beat Ramona Pascual in a featherweight matchup back in June at UFC 275. Took a unanimous decision over her. That is her only fight at featherweight in the UFC. So she's 1-2 at bantamweight. They're going to meet in the middle at bantamweight here. Originally, Kim was supposed to take on Maria Agapova in a flyweight matchup, but here they salvaged something out of it. Doing Kim no favors. She is the slight underdog here. She's available at even money or even looks like plus 105 some places. Edwards out there around minus 120 or minus 125 as the slightest of favorites. I feel as though in your lower level fights, I end up kind of introducing my pick this way, where I'm like, both of these women are borderline UFC talents, but there's one of them that I can tell what she does well, and the other one, there's really not much. Kim's biggest problem for me is that she is just not physically strong, and that's a problem at flyweight. Flyweight is not a great division right now, but most of the women in the division are pretty good size for 125 pounds, and most of them are pretty physically strong. Kim is not. She's very tall, she's kind of thin, and is a boxer and kickboxer by preference, and thus far, she's just not been able to keep UFC quality flyweights off of her. The women she's beaten in the UFC, I mean, she's 3-5. She's beaten Justine Kish, Melinda Fabian, and Nadia Kassem. First thing, all 3 of them are gone. And all 3 of them kind of played into her style. Kassem and Fabian both wanted to kickbox from outside, and they just weren't as good at it as she is. But Grasso, McCann, Cachoeira, even Antonina Shevchenko, all just kind of bullied her. They dictated the range and beat her at her own game. If those flyweights were going to be able to do that, I think Edwards is absolutely going to be able to do that, because Edwards is a bantamweight. She's a pretty big bantamweight, and she is a physically strong and athletic one. It is lucky for Kim that Edwards kind of prefers to be an outfighter herself. She seems to be an outfighter who, if that's not working for her, she'll actually like go for takedowns or try to clinch. She's just like, I mean, you call some people all the way in or all the way out. She's really all the way in. And I think she beats Kim at either of those ranges. If they just pot shot from the outside, I think Edwards kind of wins a tepid decision and keeps her job, and Kim loses hers. If Edwards decides to force the issue, crash the pocket, get Kim in the clinch, I think she's going to maul her. I'm going to split the difference. Give me Edwards by decision, but like a bad one where she beats Kim up bad and there's just no question.
Yeah, yeah. This really is a weird matchup, being that they were 2 weight classes apart. Kim, she's a minus athlete. Like that's one thing that you said that's against her. Being you said like she doesn't really do anything good. Well, lack of athleticism that happens a lot of time. She's flat-footed. She's slow. She kind of keeps the chin in the air. She tries to make up for it with some good output, and I'll say she's pretty good at that. She stays busy with a jab, but she's a headhunter. She hardly ever goes to the body, hardly ever throws any kicks. She likes to get into the pocket and kind of unload shots. You mentioned she doesn't have a lot of power. Maybe going up to 135, like we've seen that happen. The smaller fighter, not cutting weight, going up, gets a little bit more power. Maybe that happens for her. Maybe she feels better at 135. She's willing to. She has a brawling style where she'll like eat a shot to try to land one of her own. But she was getting out like you talk about like Edwards being bigger there. She was getting out muscled by Alexa Grasso in the clinch. She's a bad wrestler. She has weak takedown defense. I mean, she got out wrestled by Antonina Shevchenko. She does have 3 submission wins, so maybe she can catch a submission. Edwards was pretty big at featherweight. Like she's because of her length, like she can fight at featherweight and have no issues. She's a long and lengthy Muay Thai striker who's got good volume. I think she got some quick hands. They do kind of come low from her hips, so everything's kind of coming up at you, so it's a little hard to see. She has some pretty good pop in her shots, good kicks. I like that she targets the body, targets the legs. She throws a lot of teep kicks. She even those like oblique kicks. I was surprised that she was hurt to the body by Pascal in her last fight. That's a little concerning. But you mentioned it, like she gets all the way in. She's going to the Muay Thai plum clinch, knees, elbows, really easy for her because such a size advantage, especially against Kim. She's going to have a bigger size advantage. You mentioned that she'll go for takedowns. She's a bad defensive wrestler, but to her credit, she's hard to hold down. She does make the mistake, though. Like if she's not trying to work her way up, she'll throw some submission off the back, which I don't like. But she also surprisingly has 3 subs. I'm with you. I like Edwards to win this fight. She's bigger. She's the more decorated striker. I think she lands shots from the outside. I think when Kim gets inside, it's Edwards who initiates the clinch. So she's on the offense in there. I'm surprised by these lines. I would have had Edwards a much bigger favorite than like almost a pick'em fight. Give me Edwards in a very comfortable, easy win.
I'm with you here. I mean, obviously, I picked Edwards resoundingly as well. I wonder if the only thing kind of holding back the odds makers and the bettors is the fact that she's stepping on relatively short notice and cutting back down to 135 after having fought like 6 weeks ago at 145. That's the only thing it could be, because otherwise she's better everywhere.
Yeah, that's fair.
We head now to the welterweight division for another kind of quickly thrown together matchup and another debuting fighter. It is Michael Morales versus Adam Fugitt. Morales, the 22-year-old Ecuadorian, is a perfect 13-0 as a professional mixed martial artist. He is 1-0 since joining the UFC out of the 5th season of Dana White's Contender Series. There, he took a unanimous decision over Nicolae Veretennikov. He debuted in the UFC at UFC 270 this past January, shocked Trevin Giles in Giles's welterweight debut, knocking him out late in the first round. So Morales seems to be on a mission to single-handedly depopulate Texas. He's going to have to take a break from that as he will be taking on the Oregonian Fugitt. Fugitt steps in for Ramiz Brahimaj, who withdrew with an injury within the last week or two. Fugitt 8-2 as a professional mixed martial artist. This will be his debut in the UFC, but he's on a 4-fight win streak, including a win in February in LFA over Solomon Renfro. Perhaps due to Morales's obvious upside as a prospect, perhaps due to the late notice of the fight, Morales is the biggest favorite on the card. He is minus 575, Fugitt plus 450 as the substantial underdog. I understand why Fugitt is such a huge underdog, but it's worth mentioning that he was a plus 400, plus 450 underdog to Solomon Renfro too. And he knocked him out in 45 seconds. And it looked like someone getting knocked out in the cartoon. Like
the commentators are going crazy.
Yeah, he knocked him straight off his feet. He spun around like a cartoon character. So he got his work cut out for him, but talk to me about this fight, Keith. Who gets it done and how?
Yeah, I think it's got a fun fight. Morales is a guy that, going back to the Contender Series, just a guy that really jumped out to me as a good fight. And then he got a good win in his UFC debut. He has all the tools. He's a long and lengthy fighter, strong, good striker. He can work from a distance with a jab. The negatives that I saw in the past, he can throw a lot of single strikes, though his last two fights, the Contender Series and the Giles fight, he showed a much better output. He tends to throw from his hips, which is a little concerning, but he does this thing where he likes to sit back, lull a little bit, and then spring, be explosive, spring into the mid-range and start landing some power shots. He showed off that he's coming into his power. He's only 23 years old. He showed off against Trevin. What's his?
Giles.
Giles. Sorry, I was thinking of Trevin Jones. Giles. He showed his power in his last fight. He tends to lack a little head movement. He stands a little high for my liking, but being that he's only 23, as you mentioned, there's tons of areas of improvement. Like that could not even be an issue in this fight. Really good kicking game. He throws hard kicks, and he's a really good wrestler. He's you talk about him. He's a national Ecuador wrestling champion. So he's really good at winning wrestling exchange. He only has one submission victory, so he's not a threat there. He's probably more like hold you down and beat you up, but maybe something, again, being at his age, is something he might improve. Fugitt, if I say it wrong, it's hard to be excited for a guy, even though you're right. His last fight was a lot of fun, especially shout out to the commentators who was like losing their shit over him getting a knockout. But it's hard to get excited over a guy making his debut, 33 years old, and he's also taking the fight and fairly short notice. He's a southpaw. He tends to hang his hands low, very wide. Like everything's kind of, his hands are kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of just loose on the outside, just kind of dangling around. But he throws a lot of single strikes, but he's got some decent pop. He throws tons of kicks, ton of teep kicks. Going back, you mentioned the Renfro fight. He threw like 10 straight high kicks to start the fight. Like it was like 10 in a row or something like that. I haven't seen too much of a ground game. Again, this got thrown in like kind of short notice, but he does have 3 submission wins, so I do like that. Both guys are obviously fairly new to the UFC. Morales is 10 years younger, and he looks like a future top 15 guy. Like he has that kind of ceiling. Fugitt just looks like a low end guy in the division. Like it's nice that he made it to the UFC. Maybe he'll win 1 or 2 matches here and there, but I just think Morales is better than Fugitt everywhere. I understand why he's such a huge favorite. I think he smashes him on the feet. I think he takes him down when he wants. Fugitt has only been stopped once in his career, so I say he makes it to the distance, but I see Morales kind of styling him for 15 minutes. I take Morales in an absolute blowout decision.
Yeah, I understand why the line is what it is here. I'm interested to see how Morales approaches the fight, because I agree he should be better everywhere, but if he's going to get in trouble anywhere, it's going to be on the feet, where he is taking on a guy who demonstrably has a ton of power and does try to leverage it from the get-go. Like he comes out like a house on fire. If Morales just hangs around and gets silly in the first round, he could get caught here. He could get hurt. He might even lose. He'll probably still win if he just engages in a kickboxing match. He's a better kickboxer, but if he decides to go to his wrestling, he has a much safer route to victory. And I'm interested to see which he chooses, or if he has to kind of learn his lesson the hard way, get something he doesn't like the taste of on the feet, and then go to his wrestling. I'm going to say that the mismatch here in terms of talent, not to mention that Morales is prepared for this fight and was getting ready to fight Ramiz Brahimaj. That's a pretty tough test. I'm going to say that he actually does get Fugitt out of there. Give me Morales by second round TKO. And I think this is just a shellacking. I bet we get a 10-8 first round where somebody's a little wobbly headed back to his corner. Next up at UFC 277 is a lightweight matchup between Drakkar Klose and late notice replacement opponent Rafa Garcia. Klose, the 34-year-old Michigan native fighting out of Arizona, is 12-2-1 overall. He's 6-2 in the UFC. He is coming off a win. He knocked out Brandon Jenkins early in the second round at UFC on ESPN, Luque versus Magomed back in April. Before that, he got knocked out in the second round by Beneil Dariush. He'll look to keep the good streak going against Garcia, who steps up for Diego Ferreira on just a couple weeks' notice. Garcia, 27-year-old Mexican former standout from Combate Americas, is 13-2 overall. He is 2-2 in the UFC, but he is on a 2-fight win streak. He lost his first 2 out the gate to Nasrat Haqparast and Chris Gritzmacher. Since then, he's come back with back-to-back wins over Natan Levy and Jesse Ronson. The most recent of those, the Ronson fight, was at the same UFC Luque versus Magomed card that Klose fought on. This one is fairly close, no pun intended, on the odds, especially considering the late notice replacement. But Klose is minus 225 or so. Garcia plus 175. Keith, this is another one where it's 2 lightweights. Neither of them is that bad. No. It's just a really, really deep division where you got to win a lot of fights in a row to make any kind of splash. Who takes a step in the right direction here?
Yeah, you always feel bad for the guy who takes a loss because, I mean, if you're not in the top 15 and you take a loss, I mean, you are buried.
You're Gen Pop.
Like, you just fell to, like, 75th or something, you know. I think it's a fun stylistic matchup. I would have really been intrigued with Drakkar Klose versus Diego Ferreira, or Carlos Diego Ferreira, if that fight went down. But this one, I think is not a bad consolation prize. Klose has been a guy who I think he's been in closer to the top 15, like just outside, like someone we might, you know, maybe top 25, top 30 kind of guy. He's a counter striker. He does really good to keep his base underneath him, so he kind of like steps into shots. He's got nice pop in both of his hands. It's funny because a lot of my notes come from the Dariush fight because that's such a fun fight to watch. He almost knocked Dariush out. Like that's how good he can be at times. He's got a really good straight right. He tended to throw from his hips, which leaves him open to counters, which is a little concerning. He's got really good calf kicks though. He's also a very physically strong dude. He's big for the weight class. I mean, I think last time we described him as just a brute kind of guy. And he fights that way. He'll get into a clinch battle, grind in there, land short elbows, likes pressing his opponents against the cage, and then maybe dropping down to the hips. He did it a lot against Mark Diakese. He's looking for more clinch takedowns than shooting entries from the outside. He was easily out grappled by Dariush, which is concerning, but like. That's Beneil Dariush is a elite grappler. But the positive spin on that is Dariush had his back, had him in bad positions, and Dariush couldn't find a submission on him. It took him a really long time to kind of win that kind of battle. So that's really good if you're a Drakkar Klose fan. Now, Garcia actually, he's kind of similar to Klose in that he isn't a great athlete, but he's pretty technically sound. He marches forward wants to get in the pocket and kind of brawl a little bit. And I should say he's not technically sound, but because I want to say he's technical, but he's a minus athlete who just finds a way to kind of win fights that he probably shouldn't. Like Natan Levy's a much better athlete than Rafa Garcia is. I mean, Natan Levy's probably one of the better athletes in the UFC just in general. But
yeah, he looks like a superhero.
Yeah,
and he moves like it. Yeah.
Yeah, but Garcia just I guess he's more gritty. He's a grit kind of guy. He gets in the pocket. He wants to throw down. He throws a lot of looping hooks. He's got pretty good power. He will wrestle a little bit. Not much setups for his takedown. He kind of overreaches, very Michael Chiesa style, but he's got a relentless attitude to get it there. Like I said, a bit of an overachiever. He just one of these guys who are just similar to who we talked about, Cosce. If he can get a leg, he can lift you up in the air and slam you. He did get a submission his last fight, which you gotta like. He's got a really good chin. Like you go back to the Nasrat Haqparast fight. Haqparast landed some big shots on him, and he kept coming forward, pressing the action. He showed off really good cardio in that Levy fight. That's kind of probably how he beat Levy, just outworked him. So expect a good output. Like it's a little concerning that he took this fight on short notice, so that might not be a strength that it normally is. Obviously, we'll see. I think this fight is closer than the betting line should say, but I'm going to go with Klose. Klose, he's a little faster than Garcia. I also think he is, even though Garcia likes to wrestle, I think Klose might be the better wrestler. He's a little bigger. I don't think he's really stronger, which is surprising because Klose is really strong. I think that might be a little bit of a wash in that department, but I say Klose lands the better power shots. I think he might be more technical in the clinch. I say Klose wins a more competitive decision than people expect.
I don't have much to add to this. I agree with your assessments of both of these guys. And I think Klose is a guy that just kind of flies a little under the radar in this division. Again, we talked about it off the top of this segment. You have to
everybody
do a
does.
lot.
Yeah,
like everybody flies under the radar.
Yeah.
You know, unless you're Paddy Pimblett and you do something to bring all kinds of attention to yourself. If he was just some other dude who just won his third fight in the UFC, nobody would give a shit who he was. Like Drakkar Klose, he's got a good resume there. He's 6-2 in the UFC. And while most of the guys he's beaten aren't world beaters, the only guys he's lost to are Derrick and David Tamer, back when Tamer was like appeared to be headed towards his title shot. He was probably like the hottest up and coming guy in the division.
Yeah.
Charles DeBronx happened to him. Like DeBronx choked him out and that was it.
That's it.
He never fought again.
Yeah. What the
hell?
That
was what, 2018, 2019? Yeah.
Yeah, that's weird.
Yeah,
the name I forgot about.
Yeah. Well, dude.
And he was good.
He was very good. He was also a grappler. And so I think when he ran into DeBronx and was like, oh, this is what it's gonna be like. He's like,
yeah. And but his brother was like the complete out. His brother was terrible.
His brother was terrible, but he finally got a win in the UFC. He was kind of like the Herbert Burns of of Sweden. Anyway, I have Klose in this one as well, and I think the odds would be closer. Again, I swear I'm not doing this on purpose. The odds would be closer if both these guys were coming off of full camps preparing for each other. But as it is, as you pointed out, one of Garcia's weapons is his kind of perseverance that springs from his cardio. We don't know if that's going to be there in force. So give me Klose by decision as well. But this one should be a really fun one.
Speaking of Herbert Burns, I think like his next time he walks out to the cage, like Gilbert should carry him.
Carry him back in too.
He carry him out of the cage, but that's what we do. He carries him to the cage too. Honestly, save his energy a little bit.
And also, I think every time Paddy Pimblett fights, Molly McCann should have to carry him on her shoulders now.
Yeah, I love Molly.
That was amazing. Next up is a heavyweight matchup, and if you're keeping count, this is the 5th fight in a row at UFC 277 that features a late replacement opponent. It is Don'Tale Mayes versus the debuting Hamdy Abdelwahab. Mayes, the 30-year-old Kentucky native, is 9-4 overall. He is an even 2-2 in the UFC since joining as a 3-time veteran of Dana White's Contender Series. Yes, that's right. He came into the UFC and basically half of his fights had been on the Contender Series. Since being
they should put this guy in the Contender Series just for the hell of it. Like, hey, I just won my last fight in the UFC. Yeah, I'm putting out a Contender Series. We're giving the Joe Lozon Jens Pulver treatment. Oh, you beat Jens Pulver? Yeah, go the older fighter.
Yeah,
they get a contract in the league. You just want to fight in.
Oh, and by the way, he's going to be one of the coaches of that season. So you're going to have to like look at a dude telling you what to do that you knocked out in 90 seconds.
Yeah, and everyone's going to pretend like we didn't realize that happened.
Yeah. Oh, 2005, never changed. Or I guess that was probably like 2006.
Yeah, maybe. It was like right after Justin Eiler's got a title shot after he got knocked out. His fight before, like face planted in the first round in like 1 minute. Right before that.
As much as we complain, the sport sure is better in a lot of ways these days.
Yeah.
Anyway, Mayes finally graduated to the UFC out of his 3rd try on Dana White's Contender Series. Promptly lost his first 2. Frankly, the one to Ciryl Gane, kind of excusable. But since then, he's won back-to-back fights over Roque Martinez and Josh Parisian. The problem is that they've both been about a year apart. The last one, the Parisian fight, was back last November, so it's been a little less than a year this time. I guess that's a good sign. He had been scheduled to face Justin Tafa. Tafa had to withdraw. In comes the debuting Abdelwahab. I believe he is the first Egyptian-born fighter in the UFC, Egyptian by way of New York. He is 29 years old. Here's a little bit of controversy for you. If you look at his biographical information directly below our faces, you will see that we have him down as 5-0. If you look at Tapology or you look at the UFC's own website, they'll have him as 3-0. Most other outlets are reporting him as 3-0. Here's the difference. His first 2 fights were in Gamebred FC. That is, of course, Jorge Masvidal's promotion. They were both bare knuckle. And because of that, some outlets are not counting them as MMA. I don't know why that is. They were certified and sanctioned by the Florida Athletic Commission. They are MMA. He is 5-0. Everyone else is wrong and we're right.
Take
there
that.
There were no odds on this fight up to like Sunday afternoon, but some finally appeared just a few hours before we record. Not a good look for Mays that against a debuting guy who is either 3-0 or 5-0, but regardless of how you count that, all those fights have happened within like the last 18 months.
Yeah.
And a guy that we're about to get to how hard it is to find tape on him, he is only minus 125. Abdelwahab is plus 100 as the even money underdog.
You know the reason for that, right? The
odds makers
terrible. The odds makers have seen Dontel Mays fight before.
Yeah, it's because there is tape on Mays.
It would have been better if they actually made him an underdog.
Yeah. I mean, here's my take on this fight. What little tape I was able to find on Abdelwahab, and a lot of it was GIFs. That's how bad it is. But in fairness to him, a lot of his fights have been GIF length. Like, he's got 15-second wins, 22-second wins, 33-second wins. He does have a Greco-Roman wrestling background, and he will chuck people to the ground with body locks and mash them there. But mostly, he's just been rushing forward behind haymakers and slugging people, like an even less technical early Shane Carwin. The similarities continue because, like Carwin, he's not as tall as they're trying to tell you he is, but he is built like an absolute brick shithouse. Like, this guy is going to be much, much shorter than Mays because Mays is a gigantic human being. But Hamdy Abdelwahab is a unit. He's like somebody took Ilir Latifi and just kind of blew him up by 25% in every direction. So they took like the 5'7", 220-pound guy and made him like a 6'0" 260-pound guy.
Just match them against each other now. Next,
or just stack them like those Russian dolls that go like one inside the other.
They get bigger.
Yeah. Dontel Mays, he has developed since I've seen him. I mean, I've seen him 3 times on the Contender Series, 4 times in the UFC. He's gone from being a miserable, sloppy brawler to a miserable, sloppy brawler who tries to wrestle sometimes. And it's actually an improvement. I mean, that's kind of been the difference between his first 2 losses in the UFC and his 2 recent wins. But I just don't I don't think Mays is the worst heavyweight in the UFC because you know what? He beat Josh Parisian and Parisian's still in the UFC. So QED, he's better than at least one guy. He's better than Roque Martinez, even if Martinez is gone. But he's the worst 500 heavyweight in the UFC. He's 2-2 in the UFC. He's the worst guy that doesn't have a losing record. And I think he's just tailor-made for Abdelwahab to come in and shock the world. Abdelwahab's going to come forward, throwing huge looping overhands as hard as he possibly can. Dontel Mays is here for you. He stands tall. He keeps his chin up. His hands aren't close enough to his chin. He fights like just being 6'6" is going to keep his head far enough out of range. And if he decides to kind of go to his wrestling thing that he's embraced, especially against Parisian, I don't think it's going to be there against a guy that, at least by reputation, comes from a wrestling background and whose center of gravity is about 10 inches off the ground. Give me Hamdy Abdelwahab by first round TKO. And I don't think the experiment's going to last that long. I don't think he has a whole lot of upside, but this is a lot more exciting for me than Mays versus Tafa.
Yeah, absolutely. 100. I 100% agree. I just think of being the first fighter from Egypt. This is what I wish the UFC had a little bit more of the WWF spin on things, because if this was a WWE fighter making his debut in WWE from Egypt, he'd come out like a mummy or as a
like have the Iron Sheik type headdress,
or
they
like
do
a pharaoh hat.
Yeah,
or he'd come out in like the tomb and the smoke would come out and he'd come out ripping off the mummy shit. This. Everything you said has actually made this one of my favorite fights on the card. I really am intrigued by how
the UFC should hire me.
Yeah, there you go.
I missed my calling. I should be in PR.
That's it. The things Dante Mays, I think I like him a little bit better than you do. He's huge, as you mentioned. He's 6'6", but he's not just tall. He's not Stephen Struve tall. He's big, burly. I mean,
yeah,
he's built like Derrick Lewis.
Yeah,
and he actually kind of fights like Derrick Lewis. He's fairly athletic. He's not this like lumbering guy. He's got good movement. He can fight out of both stances. Obviously, he has power, but he kind of telegraphs his shots. That's when he drops his hands. He kind of loops things. He also throws a lead uppercut a lot, which I hate. We've talked about this best. He has a judo background. I've dissed his judo background like a million times, but in fairness, he started to get some clinch takedowns against Josh Parisian. So I like that. I still wouldn't consider him a wrestler. I mean, his takedown defense is pretty bad. He plays BJJ off of his back, which I don't like anybody playing BJJ, especially not heavyweights. But when he was on top, he looked to advance position against Josh Parisian. He even looked for a crucifix. But his cardio is bad. He is gassed out in the past, and that's because he throws everything with power. Now, Hamdy Abdelwahab.
It's pretty good. Yeah, that's it.
I'm going to call him Hamdy because that's a pretty dope name. Obviously, this guy's the ultimate wild card. I saw almost no film on him. The one I found was that bare knuckle boxing MMA fight, and I get the idea why people think it wasn't a bare knuckle boxing fight. So it was like the early UFC days where they have tape on their hands, so it's not like the early UFC when it's completely skin on. But he smashed some really fat guy in 14 seconds. Like that's the only thing I saw of him. I saw this other one. It was like, again, like you said, like a little highlight, and he was fighting some other tomato can MMA, and he smokes him in 30 seconds, lands a big shot. The guy falls down. He goes right to mount and starts ground and pounding him. He's a short, compact dude. I mean, you mentioned it. He's built like Latifi. He's a brick shit house. He hits really hard, apparently, because he's dropping guys in seconds. But you kind of undersold his wrestling background. You said, "Oh, he has a background in Greco-Roman wrestling." Dude wrestled in the Olympics. Like, he's an Olympic wrestler. I follow wrestling. In the international scene, you have the two styles. You have freestyle and Greco. I don't follow Greco as much because I never wrestled Greco. I didn't really like. I think it's kind of boring of the two. And I definitely don't follow the international scene as much as I do. I like folk style wrestling the best. That's your high school. That's your college. And then on the international scene, I follow more the Americans than I do. I can't follow these other countries, and it's very hard to find. But so being that he wrestled in the Olympics, I'm going to assume, and he's from the Middle East, which is a really good area to wrestle. Like this, not, we look down on Middle East and other sports, not in wrestling. So I'm assuming he has elite level wrestling. I'm assuming a lot of those things are going to come, if you know Greco-Roman, they're going to come from like clinches, body locks, chest to chest type takedowns. What I did see him hard ground pound. I saw one fight where, like I said, he got quickly to the mount. I am really worried about his cardio. He's taking this fight on short notice. Also, he just every fight I've seen him, he just explodes and throws big bombs. So I would worry about him slowing down. I don't think anybody can have confidence in this pick. This I know about Mays. I'd say he's a quality UFC heavyweight. I don't know if that's the case with Hamdy. But I'm going to go with, me, man. I always go with high-level wrestlers. I'm going to go with the upside, too. I say he throws a haymaker until he gets into clinch. I say he slams Mays down, starts unloading heavy ground and pound, big hammers. And I'm going to say Hamdy gets a first-round TKO.
The UFC 277 prelims soldier on with a lightweight matchup between Drew Dober and Rafael Alves. Dober, the 33-year-old Nebraska native, is 24-11 with one no contest overall. He is 10-7 with one no contest in the UFC. He did win his last time out. It was a first-round knockout of Terrence McKinney at UFC Fight Night Santos versus Ankalaev back in March. That put the brakes on a two-fight skid for Dober against Islam Makhachev and Brad Riddell. So not too much shame in those, probably. He's going to try to keep things going against Alves. The 31-year-old Brazilian is 20-10 overall. He's 1-1 since joining the UFC out of the 4th season of Dana White's Contender Series. He also won his last outing. It was a first-round submission of Mark Diakiese at UFC Fight Night Holloway versus Rodriguez last November. That allowed him to bounce back from his debut loss to Damir Ismagulov last May. Odds on this one favor Dober pretty strongly. He's minus 220, Alves plus 185 on the comeback. Keith, Drew Dober feels as though we kind of know what he is now.
Yeah.
Rafael Alves, we're not sure. I mean, we're not even sure whether he's going to show up as a lightweight or a welterweight from one fight to the next. Thing I forgot to mention while introducing him, he is the fighter who had, at least at the time, the worst weight miss in UFC history. He showed up 11 pounds heavy for a fight. I think it was the first time they tried to have him fight Diakiese, in fact, but it was sometime within the last 12 to 18 months. Showed up just with an absolutely disastrous weight miss, really embarrassed himself. The fight was called off.
Didn't William Knight beat that, though?
Yeah, I think that's why I say at the time, because Knight.
Okay, sorry.
But like once you're going into the heavyweight realm, it almost doesn't count.
Yeah.
But because he came in at 217 or 218 for a heavyweight fight, so technically that was like 12 or 13 pounds. But
hey, New England's got the record books. We're keeping it.
Yes. In this one, I mean, these guys have both lost some fights recently, but they've all been against top 10, if not top 5 guys.
That's good.
Who wins this one? How do you see this one playing out?
Yeah, this one is one of the best fights on the card. This is really, really fun action fight. Drew Dober can't be in a boring fight. He's super exciting. Alves is really kind of making a name of himself. Looked really good in his last fight. So yeah, hopefully he makes weight and this isn't like thrown out. But Drew Dober is such a badass. Like Alves could probably weigh in at like 210 and Dober would probably still want to fight. Dober is a southpaw who he presses forward, throwing power shots. He's a pressure counter striker, really good slip and rip style, good head movement. He uses feints really well to draw out attacks, and then he slips attacks, lands power combinations as returns. I've said this before. He lands so well because of his foot placement. He keeps his base underneath him. He's constantly setting up his straight right. His southpaw, his straight left. By stepping outside the center line, lining up his hands to land right down the middle. He can tend to chase a knockout sometimes, throwing so hard instead of just flowing, like almost knocking himself over. Though it's very rare that he doesn't find the knockout. Like he's becoming a knockout machine. But and a lot of that has to do because he can take a shot. Like look at his last fight against Terrence McKinney. McKinney landed some power shots on Dober and
Dober. He and Riddell also in the fight before that.
Oh, Brad Riddell, yeah. So there's 2 fights in a row where he's ate some really good shots and had his legs buckled, but put himself in a firefight. The one thing that, and I've said this before, that'll keep Dober from being a top fighter is that weak takedown offense. He's been taken on 13 times in 4 fights, and unless he fixes that, he's always going to be this exciting, fun guy to watch, mid-card guy.
And if he doesn't fix that, they aren't even going to let him go back to Nebraska anymore. They'll tell him to move somewhere else.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, like, come on, dude. You're from Nebraska. Like, you should be wrestling. Alves is very athletic. He has that capoeira style. He can fight out of both stances. Can be very, very aggressive at times. But then there's times he just takes huge moments off. Very Yoel Romero style. That's probably why he misses weight, because he kind of watches Yoel Romero a little too much, and like brushed off on him a little bit. He did it against Ismagulov. Like he had low output, and Ismagulov just got outworked. But when things are going good, he's got quick hands. He's got good power. I mean, he rocked Mark Diakiese with a jab. He's good at getting in, landing power shots, and then getting out using that speed. He'll throw a lot of spinning attacks. He's got good kicks, though he's been buckled many times himself. He's been rocked many times on the feet, so that's troublesome, especially with a power hitter like Drew Dober. He's not one-dimensional, though. Like he likes to get in the clinch, judo throws. He has a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. He's a serious submission threat. A lot of neck attacks through scrambles, guillotines, Darce chokes. He had a Peruvian necktie before. He has a great guillotine. He caught Mark Diakiese in that. The one negative about such a submission attack is he'll chase submissions and lose position, but on his back, he sweeps really good. So I think this is an amazing fight. I like both guys. I think both guys are really good. I think the odds should be a little bit closer. Alves is the more well-rounded fighter. He could take Dober down, have a huge advantage, out-wrestle him, maybe catch a submission in a scramble. However, if he gets really aggressive, as we've seen him on times on the feet, Dober is not the guy to make a mistake against. And I actually say that happens. I've been a Dober backer. Again, I'm really nervous because of that wrestling, or lack of wrestling, I should say. But on the feet, Dober's really turned into a sniper. I think Dober lands the huge shot in the first round. I think Dober knocks him out in the very first round.
I like the breakdown there. It's interesting how both these guys are kind of deceptive. I mean, I won't go into my whole comedic rants again about how Drew Dober like looks wrestly, so you assume he's a good wrestler, and then it just turns out he's not. But you're right in that on kind of in his last fights before moving up to the UFC and early on in his UFC run, like he was always a very willing striker, but he was more of a submission specialist. Lately, he's found his power and has become much more accurate. I can only attribute that to maybe the team change. He's been at Elevation Fight Team for a couple of years now, but whatever he's doing, it's working because he's better than his UFC record looks. He's only losing to really good guys now, but he's always going to have that Achilles heel, or at least he's never going to break through into the top 15 or top 10 as long as he has that Achilles heel. And Alves also a little bit of a deceptive guy. You look at his record, and his record looks lousy, but he's one of those guys that just lost a ton of fights early in his career in Brazil because he was undertrained, he was too young, he was thrown to the wolves, like he was just thrown to better prospects. It's the same thing as Vicente Luque.
Yeah.
He has turned a corner since, like in the last couple of years as well. And obviously he's got his issues with the scale. And even when he's not missing weight by a almost full weight class, he fights in a way of a guy that looks to me like he probably has a substantial weight cut and he's trying to guard his gas tank. I think that's where the Romero type output and wait and see type stuff comes from. But I'm nervous taking Dober in this just because I could see Alves take him down and take advantage of him on the ground so quickly. Like, I'm with you. I'm going with Dober by KO in this one, but my second most likely outcome is Alves by first round submission. But yeah, give me Drew Dober by first round TKO. But again, if it's flipped exactly the other way around, Alves takes him down, takes his neck, and this is over in like 2.5 minutes, I'm not shocked. The only thing that would shock me is if some kind of performance or fight of the night bonus isn't at least in the discussion for this fight, because this one should be a hell of a lot of fun.
Yeah, it should be a good one.
Speaking of fights that should be a hell of a lot of fun, the top prelim at UFC 277 is a welterweight matchup between Alex Morono and Matthew Semelsberger. Morono, the 31-year-old Houston native, is 21-7 with 1 no contest overall. He's 10-4 with 1 no contest in the UFC. He is on a 3-fight win streak, those coming against Donald Cerrone, David Zavada, and Mickey Gall. The most recent of those, the Gall win, was last December at UFC on ESPN Font versus Aldo. He'll try to make it 4 straight against Semelsberger. The 29-year-old Marylander is 10-3 overall. He is 4-1 since joining the UFC. He won 2 fights in a row to start off with, dropped 1 to Chaos Williams, has come back with 2 more wins in a row over Martin Sano and AJ Fletcher. The most recent of those, the Fletcher fight, was back in March at UFC Fight Night, Santos versus Ankalaev. Semelsberger is a slight favorite here. He's minus 170. You can get Morono at plus 145 on the comeback. These two guys are pretty opposite in a lot of ways. Alex Morono is an overachiever. He does not present as a high-level athlete because he is not a high-level athlete.
No.
I mean, it's frankly kind of an inspiring story. He's a dude that, like, at age 18 or 19 was just like, I'm tired of sitting on my couch and playing video games and being a fat piece of shit. I'm going to go get in shape. And 5 years later, he's in the UFC. Right now, he has 10 wins in the UFC. He's on a 3-fight win streak. I mean, He's running his own pretty damn successful gym. And, if not a ranked welterweight, he is absolutely one of the most just reliable action fighters, the kind of guy that you put on the top prelim of your pay-per-view card in his home state. Semelsberger.
And he beat Donald Cerrone.
He knocked Donald Cerrone out.
Yeah.
Knocked
Donald Cerrone out, yeah.
Semelsberger, it's interesting that they're only like a year and a half, or like I think less than 2 years apart in age, because Morono feels like he's becoming a grizzled veteran and Semelsberger feels like a raw prospect. And it's mostly because Semelsberger is so relatively new in terms of fight age, but he's an explosive athlete. He looks and moves like a former small college like safety or cornerback, because that's exactly what he is. I believe he was like a D3 defensive football? Back. Yeah.
I swear I never heard them say that.
Oh, did they say that sometimes?
Did they say
next thing you'll be telling me is that Brian Stan used to be in the Marines. And that Ian Heinisch was in jail once. They talk about him like he's Kaiser Soze, like he's like the head of like
Tony Soprano, man.
Anyway, Semelsberger is an explosive athlete, and everything runs off of that, which makes his fights a whole lot of fun. And for a guy who throws everything as hard as he does, who goes for takedowns as hard as he does, his gas tank is surprisingly not terrible. You just expect a guy that looks like he does and approaches a fight like he does to have the Orion Cosce thing where he's got 7 minutes of cardio, but he's been in 3-round fights, and when he's won, it's been fine. And when he lost to Chaos Williams, it's not because he was the more tired guy. Chaos Williams is a better fighter. Semelsberger is absolutely the kind of guy that can leverage those advantages in speed, power, and size to catch Morono. Like, Morono got sniped by Chaos Williams in like 36 seconds because while he was still kind of finding the range, he got, in a collision. Williams was too fast, hit too hard, and even Morono, who has a hell of a chin, just couldn't recover. Like, Williams hurt him bad, followed up with accurate follow-up strikes, and the thing was over. Semelsberger could do that to Morono. Like, no question. Because Morono has the most underused BJJ black belt possibly in the UFC, and it's not the Charles Rosa thing.
like George Cagel.
Yeah.
He used to be like the coach for Rich Franklin, and then he always wanted to box everybody. And it was like, dude, you're world class. Not just like you're world class. Go for a takedown.
Like, I assume that when George Cagel gave Dustin Hazlett his black belt, he just literally gave him his own black belt and said, I'm not going to use it anymore. Right. Like, you go do it. And like, Hazlett goes off and just rips off some of the coolest submissions we've ever seen, and Cagel goes back to slugging it out. That's Morono. Like, he's said in my presence, I've interviewed him a few times in an official capacity, as well as just kind of, talking with him. He's like, if one of my fights goes to the ground, it's not because I wanted it there. Which is funny for a guy that runs a Gracie Baja school, but there you have it. He knows himself. This, for a guy that the UFC probably sees as having potential contender upside in Semelsberger, this is a super trap fight, because if Semelsberger decides to like shoot takedowns and take Morono down, he's playing into his wheelhouse. Morono finally did grapple against Gall and Perez within his last few fights, and he looked great in both. Like, Perez escaped just because before his ribs gave out on him, he was Anthony Pettis, and he was just impossible to hold. And Gall, Morono like out-grappled him pretty bad. It would be interesting to see Semelsberger in that kind of test. If Semelsberger just wants to hang out on the feet, unless he like just blitzes and catches Morono like Williams did, which doesn't happen very often, Morono's like a pretty composed striker for someone who's as aggressive as he is. Like, he throws everything hard, but he doesn't overthrow, and he's defensively like fairly sound. He's not a wild man. To compare it to someone he's actually fought, he's not Nico Price. He's not just like rolling in there like a Beyblade, just like spinning and like flinging stuff all over the place. I could see, like, if you tell me the fight ends in a finish, like, if you just look in the crystal ball, say this fight ends in a finish, it's probably Semelsberger. But give me Morono just to be a little too smart, too experienced, too tough, turn away a fighter in Semelsberger that maybe, like, I don't know who wins on Saturday, but if these guys fight again in 2 years, Semelsberger is probably like a minus 300 favorite because he's trending in one direction while Morono kind of is what he is at this point. But this is a good time for the homie from the Woodlands to catch the hot up and coming prospect. Give me Alex Morono by decision.
Yeah, you're like he's too smart. He's too quick. Too this, too that. It's also lives too close to Ben.
There are fighters who live close to me that I'm perfectly willing to tell you when they're going to lose. And if I thought Morono was going to get starched, I'd give you a wink. But I do legit think he's going to win this fight.
I know. I'm just teasing you. Yeah, that's gonna be a fun fight. That's gonna be an action fight. But because Moreno, he's an aggressive guy. I think he's more of a brawler than you give him credit to. He loads up on shots, but he's, for a guy who you look at him, you wouldn't think he has power. He can crack. Like he's not one of these guys like one punch pretty lights up. But he's rocked a lot of. I mean, obviously he put Cerrone on, but he rocks a lot of guys. Kicks are a big part of his game. Throws them a lot. He likes spinning attacks. Like he's exciting. You mentioned it. He's not much of a wrestler, both offensively and defensively. I mean, he hardly ever looks to wrestle, but he is a BJJ black belt. We've seen him when it gets there be pretty good. But more of a top side grappler. If he's pinned against the canvas, he really struggles to go up. Like I got to go all the way back to the Jordan Mean, but like Jordan Mean was able to take him down and just turn into a wrestling match. And Morono couldn't win. Now, Semelsberger, you mentioned it, they are complete opposite. He's a very good athlete, quick twitch, explosive. He's a boxer that has quick hands, high guard defense. He has good outputs in some fights, but against the Chaos Williams fight, he's a little trigger shy in that fight. But Chaos hits really hard, so that might be it. And he could be a little trigger shy if Moreno's landing some of those big shots. The crowd's rocking on Moreno. Every time Moreno hits him with something, the crowd's exploding. I can see him a little gun shy in this fight. Going into enemy territory too. But for a younger guy, he does some things pretty intelligent that I like. He has very slip and rip style. His right hand is his best blow. I love that he attacks the body. Like that's the one thing. He works the body, then he starts going to the top, and he's got some really good power. We saw it against Jason Witt. We saw it against Martin Sano. Again, both those guys probably not UFC talent, so he looks. If you're not UFC talent, Semelsberger going to put you out in highlight reel fashion. Because he's new, he has some defensive flaws. He backs straight up, chin and high in the air. He's an underrated offensive wrestler. He will go for a takedown, but he needs to improve his takedown defense. We saw in his last fight, and he obviously hasn't grappled nearly as much as a guy like Morono. Go back to like the Carlton minus, he struggled to get back up, and we've seen him slow down a little bit. That's what happened during explosive. He slowed down against minus. He slowed down against Worthy. So, there's a reason why this is a prelim headline. I do think it's going to be a fun fight. I expect some really, really good exchanges on the feet, but I'm going the complete opposite as you, man. Semelsberger is just way too good of an athlete, in my opinion, for Moreno at this point of his career. Again, you mentioned they're closer in age, but they're not in the same category when it comes to like fight age. One's got a lot of tread on his tires, and one is got a lot of damage. I say Semelsberger catches Moreno. I think he catches him early. I think we're going to have another highlight reel knockout for Semelsberger. Give me Semelsberger first round knockout. I think that's the first one we disagreed on.
No, Negumereanu and
Potieria. Yeah, early. Yeah, okay.
Both times, I took the underdog.
You got some big balls over there. So you're taking Morono no matter what.
The 5-fight main card of UFC 277 kicks off with a high-stakes light heavyweight matchup between Magomed Ankalaev and Anthony Smith. Ankalaev, the 30-year-old Dagestani, is 16-1 as a mixed martial artist. He is 8-1 in the UFC. That one, of course, the famous buzzer-beating submission loss to Paul Craig in his UFC debut. Since then, he has been perfect. 8 straight wins, including kind of leveling up into the top 10 or top 15 with 3 straight over Nikita Krylov, Volkan Oezdemir, and Thiago Santos. Most recent of those, the Santos win, was the headliner of UFC Fight Night 203 back in March. He's going to try to make it 9 straight and mint himself as the possible next light heavyweight title challenger against former title challenger Smith. The 33-year-old Nebraskan is 36-16 overall. He's 11-5 in the UFC, 7-3 at light heavyweight. He did start out at 185 in the UFC, moved up to 205. He's 7-3 since then. He is on a 3-fight win streak, those coming over Devin Clark, Jimmy Crute, and Ryan Spann, all 3 of them first-round stoppages. The most recent of those, the Spann win, was last September. It was a rear naked choke late in the first round, but has sort of stopped the narrative that he was done as a top-level contender in the UFC. He lost his title shot against John Jones, took the beatdown of 2020 from Glover Teixeira, looked kind of flat in the loss to Alexander Rakic. The popular narrative seemed to be that, okay, he's done as a top-level contender. Since then, he's come roaring back, and he's going to try to pronounce himself still very much in the title picture by stopping Ankalaev's win streak. He is not favored to do so. Aside from the last-minute Adam Fugitt against Michael Morales, Smith is the biggest underdog on the card. Ankalaev is minus 450. Smith plus 325 as the, again, substantial underdog. Keith, I'm going to toss this to you for your pick first, but I think Magomed Ankalaev has started to get a little slow rolled towards the title picture just as a natural development of what's happened as he's come into the cage against higher level fighters. Because when he first got to the UFC, leaving aside the Paul Craig fight where he was just whooping the shit out of Craig and then got tapped out with literally 1 second left, but when he was taking on the Dalcha Lungiambulas of the world, the Klidson Abreu's, even the Ivan Kudalabas, like good fighters who are flawed, he was finishing people and just destroying them. He seemed both exciting and supremely talented. Now that he's run into top level fighters, he's become a bit of a grinder. And if he kept head kicking people like he did Dalcha, it would not have taken him. This is now 9 fights that it might take for him to get a title shot. I mean, I'm still waiting. Like Anthony Smith, it's hard for Anthony Smith to have a boring fight.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, but if anyone can pull a boring fight out of him, it's probably Ankalaev. Tell me kind of how you see this fight going. Does it look more like an Ankalaev fight or like a Smith fight, and who wins?
I hope it looks a lot more like a Smith fight, and I think it's going to. Credit to us. We both have been on the Ankalaev like hype train. We were doing the how far did this guy go? Would he beat this guy? Would it be fair to that guy? Like I think we were the first ones that were really pumping this guy as a serious contender, and I still think the guy's going to be the champion one day. I really believe that. Now, he's been playing it safe. I don't know if it's boring, but it's very safe. He's just so much more technically sound than everybody he faces. But that's going to be tough against Anthony Smith. Not more that he's not that more technically sound, but Smith is going to stay in his face. I'm a fan of Anthony Smith. Let me ask you this before we really break down the fighters. You talked about like we kind of did the obituary on Anthony Smith a couple fights ago, and then he kind of came roaring back. If he loses this fight, could this be the last we see of him? Like, could we? Because I think he's really good in the the studio doing that stuff. I wouldn't mind seeing him doing like a contender series or starting to go with some play-by-play stuff or commentary stuff. I just think he's really good. And I think that's something that they might be interested in. But do you agree with me? Like this could be the last we see of him.
It would depend on how this. Yeah, it would depend. It would depend on how it goes. If he takes Glover Teixeira type punishment in this one, I absolutely could. And obviously we'll get to both of our predictions in a few minutes here, but I'll tell you right now that I see that as a distinct possibility.
Yeah.
Like a protracted ground beating is one of them. But if we see that, sure, why not? He is an old 33.
Yeah.
Like it's hard to believe that he was fighting at welterweight 7 or 8 years ago, like in the middle of Nebraska, like fighting like Josh Neer at 176-pound catch weight or something, just weird stuff like that. And then next thing I know, he's fighting John Jones for the UFC title. And if he was not such a good sport, he'd be wearing the UFC title.
Right. briefly, but yes,
yeah, for about 4 months until they rematched. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he had a million fights in the regional scene, and who knows how many like wasn't even recorded, and obviously the hours in the gym and the sparring sessions and all that. Like he's put in his time. He's clearly an overachiever to be in the position to fight for a title. And as we're talking about like him losing and what would be next to him, if he wins, he could be fighting for. He could be a multi-time title challenger, and well, I would favor Prohaska over Anthony Smith. It's not out of the realm of possibility Anthony Smith beating him. Like Anthony Smith is not that far away from being UFC champion Anthony Smith. So the fork in the road is right there for him. Like he could go either extreme right now. He is an overachiever because he's always been a minus athlete, but he's technical and he's smart. He's got great volume. He's a good boxer, throws a lot of combinations, tons of variety in his attacks. I like that he adds kicks into his combinations. I go through like a 3-punch combination, finish with like a kick. He lacks power though. He's not a big cracker. He loves teep kicks, which is a big part of his game. But he has taken God knows amount of damage. You're talking about brackish fight. You said he looked. What the word look like lackluster or something.
Looked flat. Yeah.
Flat. Yeah. He got his legs destroyed. You talk about the Teixeira fight. I mean, Teixeira was an epic beatdown. But the one thing you'll say about Anthony Smith is he's still going to be coming. He can get a beatdown from Teixeira. The reason why it was a beatdown is because Anthony Smith kept coming. Like he didn't give up. He'll never find an easy way out. Ankalaev is huge. He looks like a heavyweight. He looks like Minakov of Bellator. Like they just switch roles, and Nicolae was fighting a Bellator heavyweight title. Like I wouldn't, okay. He's well rounded, and I'm talking about his build. I'm not talking about their face. I mean their build. I'm saying he's. I don't want him to coming at me like, oh, all Russians look alike. No, that's not what I was saying.
Their haircut and beard are all the same, but
yeah, okay, yeah, fair enough. He's well rounded. He's more technical than explosive, especially lately. He's a southpaw where everything comes off of his jab. Well, actually, I didn't say so because he switches stance a lot, but everything comes off his jab. He throws a lot of kicks. Teep kicks are a big thing of his. He has a crushing high kick, as you mentioned. I mean, he killed Ian Cutelaba just like throwing the same high kick. Very Fugitt style, where he just kept throwing the high kick over and over again. Some of the best calf kicks in the game. Defensively, he keeps his chin a little high, which he's going to get blasted one day. But he's also a guy that he'll close the distance. He'll grind in the clinch. He's very physically strong in there, just physically strong. Just like he can just pin his opponent against the cage, and the round's over. They're not getting off the cage. Just technically sound there. He uses his head. What fight was it where I kept talking about his head position in a fight where he just was like frustrating his opponent, just pin him against the cage, use his head, get little knees inside, just wearing him down, and then eventually he just dropped down on the hips and take him down. Very good top game, smothering top game. Very hard to take down himself. And some really, when we saw, and again, this is his early fights in the UFC, really good ground. I mean, like, yeah, Paul Craig got the submission, but Paul Craig also was getting his head bounced off the canvas over and over again, like a basketball. So as far as the prediction go, Anthony Smith needs to make this fight a brawl. He needs to make this. He needs to say, and really what he's going to do, like, I'm outmatched. He has more tools than me. He's faster. He's better athlete than me. So I'm just going to bite down on the mouth gear. Very similar to maybe what we saw of in Julianna Pena and Amanda Nunes, the first one, where Julianna Pena is not the athlete. So let's just make it a brawl. He needs to press Ankalaev. He needs to make Ankalaev not get comfortable, not get in a rhythm, try to tire him out. I just doubt this happens. I think Nicolae is just better than Smith everywhere. I think he smashes him in every position. I think he puts him in bad positions. I think he smashes him in the clinch. I think he smashes him with calf kicks, jab, takedowns, pin him against the cage, land elbows. I think we could see another epic Smith getting blown out. He's so insanely tough, so I say he makes a decision. And honestly, I think this is going to be one of these fights where you're happy this is a pay-per-view main card fight and not a fight night main event, so we don't have 10 more minutes of Smith getting his ass handed to him. Give me Ankalaev in an absolute blowout.
Yeah, I see a lot of the same dynamic that you see here. Definitely props to Anthony Smith for having just one of the more diverse and enjoyable offensive arsenals in the sport. You mentioned, good diverse striker, throws in combination, throws in kicks with his combinations, kind of like a bit like an oversized Max Holloway that way. And while he doesn't have like one shot knockout power, like with a single punch or kick, he gets plenty of TKOs, and he usually does it by mauling people in the clinch. That's, it's how he put away Evans. It's how he put away Shogun. He just has mean intentions in the clinch, and his long, lanky frame. And it's crazy that he used to be a welterweight, because even at light heavyweight, he's tall. Like, he's going to be at least as tall as Ankalaev, even if he isn't like nearly as bulky and heavy. He just uses that to good effect to just nail people with knees and elbows in the clinch. I think very underrated. I wouldn't say underrated grappler, but underrated submission artist. His has a very diverse and opportunistic submission game. Unfortunately, all the things he does well just don't translate well to beating Magomed Ankalaev. There are still top 10 light heavyweights that Anthony Smith can beat. Obviously, he's beaten 3 straight guys who were at least kind of on the doorstep of the rankings in Clark, Crute, and Spann. And while the Crute one, there was an injury involved there, he just flat out worked Clark and Spann. But Ankalaev isn't it. He has become more conservative. He has become more airtight. But if there was a fight where he could open things up a little more, this is it. He got more buttoned down because he took on in a row Ivan Kudalaba, Nikita Krylov, Volkan Oezdemir, and Thiago Santos. Santos isn't much of a wild man, but the other 3 are complete wild men, and they all have one-shot knockout power. And he approached it like, okay, there are a lot of ways I can beat this guy. There's basically one way they can beat me, so I'm not going to get punched in the head with a haymaker.
And Santos has one-punch knockout power. I understand what you're saying, but like he could do one punch.
Yeah, no, I'm saying all 4 of those guys have one-shot knockout power, and except for Santos, the other 3 of them are wild men that are going to throw unpredictable stuff at you in bursts. Santos, since his knee injury, a lot more methodical, but all of them had one-shot power. Smith doesn't. If Ankalaev decides to open up a little bit and Smith catches him clean with something, it's going to hurt, but it's not going to like flatline him. Smith could tap him out, but Ankalaev isn't the same guy that blundered into a last-second triangle against Paul Craig 4 or 5 years ago. I see Ankalaev. I mean, he probably will get the better of things on the feet, but I see him taking this thing to the ground early and often, moving to dominant positions. He's crushingly heavy on top. And like I said, Smith is a wonderful submission artist, but pure BJJ throwing up subs from your back is not really his thing. I think this is going to be a little bit of a Teixeira-esque beating where Smith gets taken down, and as he gets more tired, it gets easier to take him down, and Ankalaev is punishing him from top position. I'm with you in that I think this is going to make it to the final horn. He made it past the first 3 rounds against Teixeira. There is no 4th or 5th round here, but Ankalaev wins this rolling downhill and going away, and maybe we get a 10-8 third round or something. A definitive statement for Magomed Ankalaev, who may well be your next light heavyweight title challenger. Speaking of wild men, the UFC men's flyweight top 10 is essentially nothing but wild men, and we get 2 of them up next. It is Alexandre Pantoja versus Alex Perez. Pantoja, the 32-year-old Brazilian, is 24-5 as a professional mixed martial artist. He is 8-3 in the UFC. He's on a 2-fight win streak, those being a unanimous decision over Manel Kopp last February and a second-round submission of Brandon Royval this past August, so almost a year ago, at UFC on ESPN Cannonier versus Gastelum. He faces Perez, the 30-year-old from California's Central Valley, is 24-6 overall. He's 6-2 since joining the UFC out of the very first season of Dana White's Contender Series. He did lose his last time out. It was all the way back at UFC 255, the headliner of UFC 255, in fact, in November of 2020, where he got guillotined by Deiveson Figueiredo in the middle of a wild first round of action. That snapped a 3-fight win streak for him over Mark De La Rosa, Jordan Espinosa, and Jussier Formiga. So back for the first time in over a year and a half and trying to get back in the win column is Perez. He is not favored to do so, but the odds are surprisingly close considering his long layoff and Pantoja's winning ways. He is plus 125, Pantoja minus 150 as the slight favorite. Keith, you said, I think it may have been between segments, that you think we might disagree on this one.
Yeah.
I got Pantoja. I'll tell you why after you go, but tell me if we disagree.
Yeah, I understand why you're taking Pantoja, but I don't have a lot of confidence. Like, you seem like you have like a little bit of confidence. This is a banger fight. I'm really excited about this one. We haven't seen Perez in a really long time, and I'm worried because he's had a long layoff, and then he did weigh in at 171, UFC 171. He missed weight, so I'm not sure he can even make the weight class. He's now 30, which is obviously a little older, probably filled into his body, so that is concerning. But if he makes the weight class and he looks good, based on what we last seen of him, he's a good fighter. I mean, he's a high output striker. He's a pressure fighter. He's a boxer with a high guard. He keeps everything inside, tight shots, accurate. His right hand is his best punch. I like that he goes downstairs to the body before going upstairs. Some really good calf kicks. He's a good wrestler, good entries, good top control, solid ground and pound. The one thing you have to obviously worry about is what we saw in his last fight, is if he gets too aggressive, he gets a brain fart, he can get submitted just as quickly as he did against Figueiredo. And honestly, even the Figueiredo seemed like he had a little bit of a quick tap. It might have been a little bit of the moment getting to him. Now, Pantoja, another guy, like I love this fight, but I hate that fight against each other because I really like both guys. Pantoja's well-rounded boxer with quick hands. I like that he throws down in the pocket, a bit of a brawler. It's funny that he brawls because he lacks head movement. He's one of these guys, he trusts his own chin to land power shots. He's willing to, take the chance, and it's usually worked out for him. I mean, he hurt Matt Snell, he hurt Wilson Heiss. And a lot of it's because he's so heavy in his front foot, he generates so much power. But on the flip side, he's open to leg kicks, something that Perez could have some serious success with the leg kicks. And he can be a little wild to get taken down. I don't know if you want to wrestle a guy like Pantoja because he's so good on the ground, and he's a very underrated wrestler himself. Like, don't be surprised if he gets Perez down easily, even though Perez is the more decorated wrestler. He looks for like body lock takedowns. That's like his style. He's not really a shooter. He most gets in the clinch, either just like a slide by or just take him down. He's got 9 submission wins. He can get submissions pretty much every position, on his back, in scrambles, on top. Catch every submission is really open to him. Larger arsenal. We've seen him get pretty much every submission there is in his career. If you take him down, he either sweeps or works back to his feet. When he does play BJJ, he's one of these such a high level one that I give him a little more leash than I do other guys. I'm on the fence. I see a lot of people taking Pantoja. I get it. He's been obviously more active. But I've always liked Perez. I thought he was doing really well against Figueiredo. It was a short fight, but he was doing well until he got caught. Again, hard to have confidence being such a long layoff and missing weight. And Pantoja is really good. But you're going with Pantoja, and I had a feeling you're going that way. I'm saying screw it. I took Perez to beat Figueiredo. Bad call, but it's one of those ones when I was watching it, I was feeling good until the submission came. I'm not going to back off from now. 2 years, again, not a lot of confidence, but I'm saying fuck it. I'm going with Perez. I think we're going to have a back and forth war, but I say he lands the harder shots on the feet. I say he gets some takedowns, wins some wrestling exchanges. I think it's gonna be our fight of the night. But I think Perez throws his name right back in the title hunt with a win.
I I have no rooting interest in this fight, but I would love to see Perez come back and either in victory or in defeat establish that he is still a top 5 guy. The division is a better and more interesting place with him. And you know what? The odds are fairly close here. If these guys fought a year ago, like last summer, even with Perez coming off the loss to Figueiredo and Pantoja coming off the win over Kopp, I think this thing is even money, or Perez is even the slight favorite.
Maybe.
Here, I think the line makes sense, but obviously there are question marks when you're talking about a fighter that's been off for 20 months, like something like that, 19, 20 months. And none of the questions favor Perez. As you pointed out, he's a guy that has already had trouble making weight. Like he is visibly the biggest guy in the division. I know there are multiple guys that have trouble making weight. Figueiredo, Kopp, Schnell. Like Perez has trouble making weight, but he looks bigger than those guys. He looks like a big bantamweight. Just he's like probably 5'6" or so, but just his shoulders and just he's got muscle on his frame.
He probably could compete and do well at bantamweight too.
I think he'd do fine at bantamweight.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons is, despite the fact that he has a huge weight cut, he enjoys pushing a furious pace. And because of that, the longer this fight goes, I also think that doesn't favor him. I liked all the things you pointed out about Pantoja. Obviously good boxer who sells out a little bit to maximize his power. Outstanding, really fun to watch grappler, and an underrated takedown artist. And I just like his creativity there where, he has the traditional entries. He has traditional trips and throws, but who did he beat in his last fight? Royval. When he beat Brandon Royval, he caught a kick. And your typical like American wrestler turned to MMA fighter, when they catch a kick, they're going to try to sweep the other leg, or they're just going to try to treetop him and knock him over. I feel like every week for the past 6 weeks, we've had someone try and fail to treetop his opponent. Pantoja caught that kick, like whirled around, took his back standing, and 15 seconds later, like Royval was tapping. It was beautiful.
He's slick, dude.
He's super slick.
Yeah.
I think this should be a hell of a fight. The only true upset would be, again, if this thing is not in the running for fight of the night. Its real competition is that we have another flyweight fight like further up the card. But Perez, he may be back. And if he can make weight on a consistent basis without killing himself, he is instantly a top 10, if not a top 5 guy on talents and achievements. But this is going to be a rude welcome home for him. Give me Pantoja by third round submission, I'm going to say. Perez maybe even wins the first round, hurts Pantoja. His gas tank starts to betray him. Pantoja takes down and taps a tired Perez in round 3. Third from the top of the UFC 277 main card is as blatant a bit of fan service as the UFC could possibly offer up to a Texas crowd, as it is a heavyweight crowd pleaser between Derrick Lewis and Sergei Pavlovich. Lewis, the 37-year-old Houstonian, is 26-9 with 1 no contest overall. He is 17-7 in the UFC. However, he is 2-2 in his last 4 fights, having alternated wins and losses. Impressive wins over Curtis Blades and Chris Daukaus, interspersed with, frankly, kind of disturbing TKO losses to Ciryl Gane and Tai Tuivasa. The most recent of those, the Tuivasa loss, was at UFC 277 in February in Lewis's hometown of Houston. Just a couple hours up the road in Dallas, he's going to try to get it back, and standing in his way will be Pavlovich. The 30-year-old Russian, 15-1 overall, 3-1 since joining the UFC as, I believe, a champ in Fight Nights Global, but at the very least, one of their biggest standouts. He lost his debut to Alistair Overeem. Since then, he's come back with 3 straight wins over Marcelo Golm, Maurice Green, and Shamil Abdurakhimov. All 3 of those first-round knockouts. The most recent of them, the Abdurakhimov fight, was at UFC Fight Night Volkov versus Aspinall, a.k.a. the first UFC London this year, back in March. Odds on this one. Lewis, as befits a longtime top contender, is the favorite here, but just the barest of favorites. He is minus 120. Pavlovich available plus 100. This is the moment of truth for Derrick Lewis, because the difference between his loss to Tuivasa and any of his other UFC losses, unless you go all the way back to like, the Sean Jordan fight in his first or second UFC fight, is he got beat by a guy that would appear to have been a lesser version of himself. Tuivasa is a brawler who is become surprisingly more technical than he was early in his UFC run. That should have been a guy tailor-made for Derrick Lewis to blast, and Lewis got knocked out cleanly. It wasn't this surreal Gane thing where the TKO was half just because he was trapped. He wasn't able to go anywhere, and Gane was just punching him until Dan Miragliotta like jumped in. Tuivasa iced Lewis. That's disturbing because the book appeared to have been written on Lewis. Yeah, there's about 2 people in the world who can beat him, and the people that really like handled him, like it was like Daniel Cormier with like, the takedowns. For him to just straight up lose a striking match to a younger guy, it makes me wonder, is Derrick Lewis now on the downslide? Was this just a one-off thing where he got into too much of a brawl, hoping to get a highlight reel knockout in front of his hometown fans? Because, it was a back and forth first round, but when he lost in the second round, he appeared to be like loading up for something big, biding his time, and just got caught with that elbow that really he shouldn't have. So is he slowing down? He's 37. 37 isn't old for heavyweight, but it's old for heavyweight if you don't care anymore. It's old for heavyweight if the damage has caught up to you. The ironic thing is that after 5 or 6 years of his back being a punchline, his back did actually appear to be better in his last couple fights. In like the Gane, Daukaus, Tuivasa fights, he looked leaner, he moved better, and still he got knocked out just clean, fair and square by Tuivasa. So that's what I asked myself going into the Pavlovich fight, because if this is the new Derrick Lewis, Sergei Pavlovich can absolutely duplicate Tuivasa's routes to victory. Pavlovich is a good striker with good power. He's bigger, and he may not weigh more than Tai Tuivasa, but he's on a bigger frame and has more quality weight on his frame than Tuivasa. So if that's how Derrick Lewis is from now on, Pavlovich could knock him out. So the whole question for me really is, has Derrick Lewis given up on being a top level contender? Is he just cashing checks at this point? Is the damage accumulating? Because if it is, I think Pavlovich either wins a lopsided decision where Lewis just doesn't pull the trigger because he didn't want to keep getting busted up, or he does get busted up and Pavlovich knocks him out inside of the first 2 rounds. If that was a one-off, then there's still almost nobody who can outstrike Derrick Lewis without him being worried about the takedown or being surreal Gane and having just the weird fainting game that really snake charmed everybody until he ran into Ngannou. Obviously, Lewis, a Houston guy, probably the most popular fighter in Texas, very beloved guy down here. It's hard for me to pick against him, but I wouldn't be surprised if Pavlovich just shows us, no, this is the way. Lewis is on the way out. I would not be surprised if this is a coronation for Pavlovich, but this is a big step up from the people Pavlovich has been beating. Abdurakhimov is a former top 10 guy who basically hadn't fought in like 3 years. Marcelo Goldman, Maurice Green were not UFC level.
But wasn't Abdurakhimov just kind of like he's former top 10 just because right place, right time kind of thing?
Yeah, right place, right time. Again, even dilapidated Lewis is a huge step up from Abdurakhimov. And you know what? Alistair Overeem, kind of catching a takedown out of a collision and then destroying Pavlovich with ground and pound is something that Lewis could absolutely do. Lewis's ground and pound is not talked about as much as his knockouts on the feet, but it's some of the scariest ground and pound in the entire sport. It is terrifying.
Yeah.
So I am picking Lewis here. I fully recognize that this is a precarious pick. I know why the odds are what they are. And frankly, I'm a little surprised that Pavlovich isn't the slight favorite here. I'm surprised that they aren't reversed. And I don't think as fight week powers on that's going to change as more money comes in on Lewis. But yeah.
Yeah. What was the odds again?
Lewis minus 120, Pavlovich even money plus 100.
Okay. Yeah.
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 I think that's honestly, I think that's fair.
Yeah, I agree.
Like a far more accomplished fighter who has some serious question marks hanging over him versus a guy on a streak who is taking a big step up in competition. Give me Derrick Lewis by first round knockout. And I'm going to say it looks like the Overeem fight. We get a few wild exchanges and, you know, they clinch, they collide, you know, and Lewis trips him to the floor and smashes him with punches and elbows. My second most likely outcome, probably Pavlovich by second round TKO. But yeah, give me Lewis.
This is you said this is a pivotal moment for Derrick Lewis. I really think it's the same for Sergei Pavlovich, is to find out if he's a true contender, if he can get by Derrick Lewis. I mean, he's right in the title picture. That's what a win like Derrick Lewis does. If it's a Chris Dawkins situation where he's starched out in like the first good exchange, then obviously we think otherwise. That'd be the second time he fought a quality opponent and kind of got smashed. Derrick Lewis, I mean, what else is to say about him? We know it is. He's a gigantic heavyweight. We've talked about this a million times. He moves much better than he gets credited for. He'll throw a flying knee. He'll throw some high kicks. I mean, he's very athletic. I've said this before. If you block his kick, he hits so hard that he just like moves you with the kick anyways. So it still looks, even when you block it still looks like he's landing. He's really good at just waiting, and then just exploding. He's the hardest hitter in the history of the sport, or like, you know, at least the best knockout artist. He's had the most knockouts in the history of the UFC. He's way more accurate than he gets credited with. And I've said this about Francis Ngannou. Obviously, goes with Derrick Lewis too. He doesn't have to, even though he is accurate, he doesn't have to land clean. He can land a grazing shot and he puts you out. He's been really measuring his opponents now, good at picking up the assignments. A perfect example of that is the Curtis Blades one. As soon as Curtis Blades came in, Derrick Lewis caught him with a big shot, obviously put him out. He's he gets like, so a lot of people think he has a bad gas tank, which I think is the complete opposite. He looks like he does. He has bad body language, so he really looks like he's slowing down. But we've seen countless times deep into fights where he might even need to come back, and he finds a way to get a stoppage because he hit so hard. You had to basically fight Derrick Lewis perfect. And the guys who beat him have done that. You look at like the Ilia Latifi fight. Latifi's, and this was not a fight, like not an example of like landing a big shot, but I mean, Derrick Lewis was to have a bad gas tank, why does he win a decision in a grueling wrestle heavy matchup against like a guy like Latifi? Now he has a terrible. Go ahead.
If I may, the stat I always like to throw out, he's now the UFC's all-time leader in knockouts. Before that, he was the heavyweight division's all-time leader in knockouts. But long before that, he was already the UFC's all-time leader in knockouts in the third round or later.
Well, there you go.
So yeah, that is not the stat of a guy with a bad gas tank.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's a complete opposite. It just, the look of him, you think he would have a bad gas tank. Yeah. He is a bad wrestler. He's a terrible wrestler, but he's very good at exploding back to his feet, hard to hold it down. He's one of these guys, like, you can start landing shots on him, and again, even when we say he explodes on his feet, he also explodes on the ground. He would just wait, and then suddenly push you off and get up. Mm-hmm. I love that you mentioned the ground and pound. I've said before, like a nightmare would be Derrick Lewis on top of you, dropping those hammers. Tuivasa is the only person to catch him, but I'm not worried about his chin. I'm more worried about him being gun shy in this fight. Like we saw against the Francis Ngannou, and again, this is a long time ago, and he's had so many fights since. But where he was a little gun shy against a guy like Francis Ngannou, I wonder if he'd be the same way against Pavlovich, being that he did just get caught, did just get knocked out. And then everything you said, the damage, the extra weight that he carries, the back injuries, all this stuff, like, is this like going to be a big decline for him? And, you know, he loses this fight, then he loses to a lesser guy, and it just, everything kind of turns ugly. That's a big question. But now, Pavlovich, for a while, we talked about the younger, new guys in the scene. Like going back like 6 months ago, we talked about Chris Dawkins and Tom Aspinall. We throw guys' name out. Like Sergei Pavlovich was not one of those guys that we threw his name out, and really should have. He's 15-1. If he's 16-0, he's the favorite in this fight. He's probably a 2-1 favorite. And we've talked about this before. just that undefeated mystique about you. And it was a loss 4 years ago to Alistair Overeem, which is not a again.
No, well, that illustrates the flip side of the undefeated fighter thing, because a lot of people, myself included, went, "Oh, well, he's a bust. He must have been overrated," and I didn't really pay attention as he just kind of came back and just started winning fights again.
Let's not mention Alistair Overeem is one of the greatest fighters of all time,
and his ground game is always criminally underrated.
We've always said he's called a striker. He's better wrestler than he's a striker. But Pavlovich, he's a good athlete for the division. He's one of the better athletes for the division, as you mentioned. He's got quick hands. He's pretty technically sound. His right hand is a beautiful thing. His left hook is a beautiful thing. He's got big power. We saw that in his last 3 fights, 3 knockouts. Not much of a kicking game. He doesn't really check kicks, so that's something I kind of hope he would add to his game. He did show off wrestling in Fight Nights Global, but so far in the UFC, he has not wrestled at all. If he doesn't wrestle with Derrick Lewis, then maybe he's wrestling something that he's lost over the ways. He did, you mentioned, go back to Alice Silver. He struggled to get off his back. If he's pinned down, that's something questionable. But again, he's struggled to get off with Alice Overeem on top of him.
At the base of the cage, too. Yeah.
And he, getting hurt with elbows. And he's not a submission threat. That's not his game. This is a hard one to pick. I wanted to go with Sergei Pavlovich. I really did. I was thinking about it until today. If he wrestles, he probably wins. I think he could hurt. I think he could hurt Lewis. It really could. Mm-hmm. And if he starches Lewis, knocks him out in the first round, then it's probably a little bit of a combination of both things, of him being just a really good star in the division, really hard hitter, and the decline of Derrick Lewis. Like, it is the perfect time for them to kind of cross pass on that, like, upward escalated, downward escalated thing going. But as I said, you have to be perfect against Derrick Lewis. One flurry, one shot, that's all it takes from Derrick Lewis. And it's in Texas. I'm going to say he gives the crowd what he wants. I think Derrick Lewis has that moment. I think he lands one big shot. I think he puts Pavlovich out. You went first. I think you said first round, right?
Yeah, I probably should have said second, because Lewis isn't going to do anything for the first 3 minutes. But yeah, I said first.
Yeah, I'm gonna go second then. I think he's one of those things where everything's going good for Pavlovich and just suddenly it's not. Give me Derrick Lewis by second round TKO.
All right. That brings us to the co-main event of UFC 277, a men's flyweight interim title match between Brandon Moreno and Kai Kara-France. Moreno, the former champ, is a 28-year-old from Mexico. He is 19-6-2 overall. He's 7-3-2 in the UFC. His last 3 fights, of course, have been a trilogy with champ Deiveson Figueiredo. The first of those was a draw, which allowed Figueiredo to retain. In their second meeting, he choked him out in the 3rd round, becoming the champ. In their 3rd meeting, back in January at UFC 270, he dropped a unanimous decision that was close enough to be somewhat contentious, but nonetheless did lose, which let Figueiredo retain. Figueiredo then out with injury and a bunch of personal turmoil. I mean, left his longtime team, left his manager, Walid Ismail, moved to Team Alpha Male, has Uriah Faber now managing him, whole bunch of drama. But nonetheless, UFC making an interim belt here, which good for Moreno, because it was pretty much his only way back to another shot at the undisputed title anytime in the near future. Standing in his way will be Kai Kara-France. The 29-year-old New Zealander is 24-9 with 1 no contest overall. He is 7-2 in the UFC. Since losing to Brandon Royval back in September of 2020, he has rattled off 3 straight wins, those over Rogerio Bontorin, Cody Garbrandt, and Askar Askarov. The most recent of those, the Askarov fight, was back in March at UFC on ESPN, Blades versus Dawkins. Moreno is the slight favorite, or actually he's the moderately comfortable favorite to pick up at least the interim version of the gold that he once wore. He is minus 210 right now. Kara-France plus 170. Keith, you gave kind of a face when I mentioned the odds there.
Yeah.
Who do you think wins this fight, and how do you think it looks?
Well,
it's a 5-rounder.
Yeah, I'm surprised at how big of a favorite that Moreno is. And I mean, I get it. He's the big.
You know what? Let me interject here. I should mention before I even let Keith go, these two have history. They fought back in December of 2019, so not even 3 years ago. It was a 3-round fight at that time. That was a UFC 245. Moreno came out on the winning end of a unanimous decision that was nonetheless close. Car France definitely picked up one round there.
Yeah. Yeah. So I get why he's the favorite. He won the last fight. He's the bigger name. He's the former champion. A lot of people thought he should have kept the title against Figueiredo. They're 1-1-1 against each other, so it's not like it's he lost a trilogy or anything like that. So I get he's fair. I didn't expect to be that big. I expected it to be like -165, 170, something like that. And again, that's not what I'm saying. How I'm picking it. Kai France is really good, so this is a really good matchup. I don't like that it's for the interim title. I know Figueiredo. He's got 2 injured hands. Both of his hands are out. He fought 6 months ago. It's like he's been out that long. I don't like interim titles just thrown out there. When Frank Mir was the heavyweight champion the first time, and he completely broke his leg in a motorcycle accident, and he was out for years. There was talks that he would never fight again. So at one point they thought he was not going to walk again. Okay. They Arlovsky waited on the silence forever before they made him the interim champion, then they made him the actual champion. But like it was a long time. Like
it was over a year before they stripped him.
Like that's what interim champions like. That's what happens.
And that's someone that Dana personally dislikes. Like Dana doesn't like Frank Mir personally, and they still waited over a year to strip the guy.
Yeah, Renan Barão getting the interim title because Dominic Cruz was out forever. We just throw him. No reason at all. We just throw these ones because the guy can't defend it. The timetable they say like he. I mean, Francis Ngannou was out for a really long time. Like he's running to get interim that, but I just don't like it. It is what it is. I'm not going to talk about Bellator, the Grand Prix with the interim. They're fighting for the interim. Whatever.
Oh my goodness.
So I just say like right now Stas is the interim champion. What happens if he has to pull out with an injury?
Interim.
And they have interim. Anyways, as far as this fight, it's going to be a really good fight. Both guys are really good. Brandon Moreno, he's a boxer that has really quick hands. He destroyed Kai France in there. I shouldn't say destroyed, but he won the first fight with just working a jab, busy jab. He did the same thing against Figueiredo in the second fight. He's got plus power, really sits on his punches. Go back to his last fight against Figueiredo. He stunned Figueiredo a couple times, buckled him a couple times. Good head movement, very bob and weave style. A lot of also shoulder rolls. So like I said, he's very boxing, Mexican boxing style. Good kicks. I love his high kick. I've talked about this before. He has this Robert Whittaker high kick where he dips to the left side and throws the high kick over the top. So he is open to leg kicks himself. He doesn't really check leg kicks, which I don't like. But he took a lot of damage in that last Figueiredo fight. He was dropped several times by Figueiredo, which is a little concerning. He's a good wrestler. He's got 9 takedowns in his I forget what it was, but he's got 9 takedowns. It's like I want to say like 4 or 5 fights in the UFC. But on the flip side, he's been taken down 15 times in the UFC, so that's a little troublesome. But he's good. He's good at scrambling. He's good at like not accepting the takedown if he's taken down. He does a lot of Grammy rolls. Good, underrated grappling. Good back takes. I mean, he is a submission. He submitted Figueiredo, which says a lot. And then he's very hard to submit himself. He's just fighting with a lot of confidence too. Like I don't think a loss to Figueiredo is going to take away his confidence. I mean, that was an absolute war, which both guys could have won. Kai France, everything I just said about Moreno and his confidence. Kai France is the same thing, but he's looking better and better every fight. He's a very good boxer, accurate, busy jab, throws straight, tight shots down the middle. His straight right is his best punch. He's really good at moving all the way in, landing shots, and then getting out. very what we kind of saw Molly McCann the other day, avoiding shots, good head movement, constantly bounces his head off the center line, has a very slip and rip style where he avoids a shot, lands a big one. One of the hardest hitters in the division, with all due respect to the current champion Figueiredo. I talk about Moreno with his Robert Whitaker high kick. That's something Car France likes to do too. Dip to one side through the high kick over the top. Good calf kicks. I like when he has an opponent hurt. And like I said, he can hit. I mean, he starched Hajera Bontarine, starched Garbrandt. I said this last time. He's composed. He hurt Garbrandt, and instead of just flurrying and missing shots and giving Garbrandt a chance to maybe answer back with a shot of his own or grab a leg, he didn't. He saw everything he was throwing. He was composed. He was cutting angles, land one shot, cut an angle, land another shot. Very calculated way how he put out Garbrandt. Defensively, high guard defense. Things that are concerning, though, and this is going back to the first fight against Moreno, he didn't like Moreno pressuring him. He isn't a good wrestler, but he showed in fairness against Askarov, he can do enough to defend to kind of make his opponent tired. We saw a lot of looking for switches, looking for spladles, very funk style wrestling. But he did get submitted by Brandon Royval somewhat recently, so that's something to keep in mind. This is a fantastic fight. If I'm coaching Moreno, I'm telling him to fight exactly the same way he fought last time. Push the pace, beat him with the output, work behind the jab. Car France could catch him with a big shot. He's fighting so well right now. It wouldn't shock me at all. He can't get out volume. He can't let Moreno out volume. He's going to have to avoid the takedowns. Very underrated grappling game by Moreno. I think we have a back and forth fight. I think the fight's going to be, you said the last fight was close. I think this fight could be much closer, but I think Moreno's going to get the better of him. I think we're going to have some really fun exchanges, but I actually think Moreno's going to catch him, take his back, and in a really back and forth fight. But I think he's going to take his back. I think he's going to submit him. Give me Moreno by 4th round submission.
I'm with you here, down to the round and method. My thought was just, after rewatching their first fight, okay, which of these guys has changed more? In what ways have they changed? And which things, that cost them in the first fight, might they have shored up? I think things actually, it favors Moreno that this is a 5-round fight. He has a lot more recent experience in 5-round fights. I mean, he went 5 rounds with Figueiredo twice. He went 5 rounds with Sergio Perez. He's been 5 rounds multiple times.
Even though he didn't go 5 rounds, he trained for the 5-round fight 3 times.
Yeah, which again we've talked about before. It changes the whole way you train.
Good point.
And while both of these guys, have admittedly difficult cuts, Car France is another a huge flyweight.
Yeah, he is.
I see Moreno's pressure still giving Car France problems. And the one thing that's changed is Car France has always been a hard hitter. I mean, he had a ton of knockouts on the oceanic scene on his way up. It's one of the things that made him kind of pop out to me as a prospect, right before he signed with the UFC. I was like, not many people with flyweight have that kind of power in their hands. I want to see this guy in the UFC. And then it didn't really show up early on, and he's found it more recently, I think, for a couple of reasons. But primary among them is confidence and poise. You pointed out perfectly that he starched Garbrandt because he stayed calm and stayed accurate after he hurt him, and that just lets the natural power in his strikes, I think, do more and better work for him. But Moreno's advantages on the ground, I think, are gonna come out again, and I think they're gonna come out the longer the fight goes, as Car France gets tired, as he probably gets frustrated from being on his back foot. And I literally was going to pop out the same thing as you. Give me Moreno to maybe not necessarily shoot a takedown, but they just end up on the ground off of a caught kick or just something that happens in the clinch. And once they're on the ground, Moreno takes his back, chokes him out, 4th round. And Moreno has another title, even if it's an interim title. And barring something weird, we get a 4th fight between Figueiredo and Moreno, sometime late this year, early next year. With that, we come to the main event of UFC 277, a rematch for the women's bantamweight title between Julianna Pena and Amanda Nunes. Pena, the champ, 32 years old, fighting out of Washington State. She is 11-4 overall. She is 7-2 since joining the UFC as the winner of the 18th season of The Ultimate Fighter. She, of course, was victorious in her last outing, choking out Nunes in the second round last December at UFC 269 in one of the biggest upsets in UFC history, both in terms of the raw odds and just the narrative and the expectations and the optics. She will look to hold on to her title in a rematch with Nunes. The former bantamweight champ, still featherweight champ, 34-year-old Brazilian, longtime American top team product fighting out of Florida, is 21-5 overall. She's 14-2 in the UFC. She is 11-2 at bantamweight. She lost her last time out to Pena. She lost a long time ago to Kat Zingano, and in between, you got about a dozen straight wins that saw her pick up those two belts. The odds, off the top of my head, I want to say Nunes was around a -950 favorite the first time. The second time, she is still a substantial favorite. She is -275 as of Sunday of fight week. Pena +225 on the comeback.
Wow.
In thinking about this rematch, well, let me roll back to December. After the initial shock of the fight wore off, I asked myself the same question I asked after Holly Holm beat Ronda Rousey. Did we see a fluke? And I don't mean a fluke in the sense that someone slipped on a banana peel, but just an unlikely occurrence, or did we see someone lay down a repeatable path to victory against a fighter that we did think was unbeatable? And I think I thought the same thing all the way back in 2007 when Matt Serra beat George St. Pierre in another of the biggest upsets in UFC history. After Serra beat St. Pierre, I said, well, that's not a fluke. Serra threw the punch he meant to throw, it landed, and the fight ended. But if they fight 10 times, it only looks like that once.
Yeah.
After Holm beat Rousey, I said, okay, Holm exposed serious flaws in Rousey's game, and if they fight 10 times, it probably looks like that almost every time, or something like it. Just
7 out of 10
like,
or something like
yeah,
that.
like Rousey just running and swinging at air, Holmes slipping out the side, and just left hand glued to her face. After Pena versus Nunes, I said, what did Julianna Pena do to beat Nunes that all these underdogs, but frankly more accomplished women who on paper deserve to be there more, couldn't do? Because Pena survived the first round onslaught of Nunes. Nunes got tired and got tired quick. And then from there, Pena hurt her on the feet, was able to get her on the ground and choked her out. And I mean, choked her out from being hurt and tired as much as Pena just being this like otherworldly grappler. If that was an easy path to victory, other people would have done it. Why wouldn't Felicia Spencer have been able to do that?
Jermaine Durandamy. Yeah.
Jermaine Durandamy. And Nunes beat Durandamy both ways. She blitzed her in the first round, and then she just soundly, patiently outstruck her for 5 rounds. Like, she beat Felicia Spencer without breaking a sweat.
Why couldn't Chris Cyborg do that?
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. If you come at Nunes in the first round, you're going to get the worst of the sloppy brawl that ensues. Yet Pena forced a sloppy brawl, survived, and outlasted. Was it a thing where Nunes' focus wasn't there? Didn't have a great camp? Already thinking about domestic bliss after this?
She talked about retirement.
Talked about
getting up there in age. She's one has relied on speed and power. Mm-hmm. She's obviously very technical too, but it's more she's better than because she's so much more powerful and more speed. Like, is that diminishing? These are questions we got to ask.
Yeah, those are the questions you have to ask. So my pick for this fight really hinges on that as much as anything. It's kind of the same dynamic I mentioned when talking about the Lewis fight. Is Lewis just falling off? Or was that a bad night at the office? Because it was weird to see Nunes get tired that fast. And that's the difference you get between when you are dictating the pace of the fight and the other person is dictating it to you. Like, very famously, everyone said BJ Penn had a terrible gas tank. No, he had a terrible gas tank when he was losing.
Yeah.
Like when he was winning,
he was just elbowing him in the gut. Yeah.
If you make him work, if you make him move when he doesn't want to move, then of course his gas tank is bad. When he's dictating it, dude, he was fresher than Diego Sanchez when he kicked his face off.
Yeah,
and right. Diego Sanchez had legendary cardio. Like, if that fight went to a fourth round, that should have seriously favored Diego Sanchez, but Penn thrashed him. Like, so is the problem that Nunes just allowed Pena to kind of put her on the back foot? Like, usually when someone runs right at Nunes, they die.
Yeah.
Cyborg died going right at Nunes.
He got dropped like 2 or 3 times. Yeah.
Yeah. I understand why Nunes, 7 months after getting choked out, is again almost a 3-1 favorite to win this fight, because I need to see it again to believe it. I don't know if Nunes wasn't focused enough last time. I don't know if she had a bad camp, a bad cut. I don't want to make excuses for her, and I don't want to diminish what Pena did, because it was an incredible moment. But Nunes has a lot of pride. She invests a lot of herself in being the baddest woman on the planet. It matters to her. She might be thinking about retirement, but she wanted to go out on her own terms. It disturbs me a little bit that like she seems to be spending more time kind of training with her own team. I would love to know what the split of time is between that and ATT for this one. But my big guess here is that Nunes is very motivated for this, is taking it very seriously. And if nothing else, she had very specific things that she could take back to the drawing board, back to Mike Brown, and say, okay, what do we do to stop this from happening next time? And if that's true, then what you still have in Amanda Nunes at age, what is she, 35, 34? Yeah, turned 34. You still have, as you mentioned, someone who is quite technical, but what makes it run is the enormous amount of power there is behind all of her strikes. She's good at basically every range. I mean, she lanced Holly Holm with a head kick. She's great from range. And if you come inside, I think she's the nastiest phone booth fighter in the sport, like male or female, any weight class. Like, if you're someone of her same gender and size, she is the nastiest person to have each of you with like a single collar tie. Just everything inside is brutal. Knees are brutal, uppercuts, mugs you with elbows. If Julianna Pena tries...
Sorry to interrupt. She made a girl like Raquel Pennington. I shouldn't say girl, a woman like Raquel Pennington, who's known for her toughness, want to quit.
Yeah, it was, and that was the most savage beating of that year. If Pena comes with the same general game plan here, I think Nunes is ready for it, and I think Nunes knocks her out in the first round.
Wow.
And that's my pick here.
Wow. Let me ask you this before I kind of get into my breakdown. I've seen a lot of people say that this is a legacy fight for Amanda Nunes, and all the pressure's on her. She can't lose twice to Julianna Pena. The GOAT status will be up there. All this stuff. Do you agree with that?
No.
I don't either. I think no.
If when she lost, it made me bump Valentina Shevchenko to the top pound-for-pound woman in sport.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
But her like overall historical legacy, her like that, no. And Val has a few more things to do, I think, before we're having that conversation.
Yeah. So well, first of all, Valentina Shevchenko is going to have a hard time because I think she has 2 losses to Amanda Nunes. That's always going to be a trump card for Amanda Nunes. The other thing, I don't think the pressure's on Amanda Nunes. I think all the pressure's on Julianna Pena. I think this is a legacy. It wasn't a fluke. Yeah, I think this is a legacy fight for Julianna Pena because you're going to have outs for Amanda Nunes. Nunes loses again. She's up there in age. Mind you, she's been fighting in 2 weight classes. She's fighting in her lower weight class. How much, she gassed out. Say Say the fight looks exactly the same way again. Second round, she's starting to lose it. Pena takes her down, whatever. You start saying, well, how much of that weight cut? She's a bigger one. At this age, mid-30s, can she still make the weight class? That's on it. She's a mother now. She's fought everybody. Like, there is an out. And then you always have there's no argument right now who's the greatest fighter in the history of women's division. She's got 2 wins over Valentinenko. Starched Chris Cyborg. Starched Ronda Rousey.
You ready for my favorite stat?
If she gets
it back against Pena, oh no, say it.
Oh, okay. No. You finish yours. I'll give you one after.
If she gets it back against Pena on Saturday, she has a win over every woman who has ever held a title in any of the divisions she's competed in Bellator or the UFC.
Okay. I was going to say this with very similar stats. If she beats Julianna Pena and then somehow fights Nico Montana, somehow, end of her career, and beats Nico Montana, she would have a win over every single champion in the history of the UFC flyweight, bantamweight, and featherweight division.
Yikes.
Like, anybody you want to bring in the GOAT conversation, she's beaten. She's high kicked Holly Holm. She's smashed Miesha Tate or Ronda Rousey. Even though you say, like, oh, look how big Megan Anderson is. Big Megan Anderson's 6 feet tall, smashes her. I mean, she's talk about Bellator, Julia Budd. Yeah.
Cyborg.
Yeah. So if this is the starting of the decline of Amanda Nunes, where she's not the best, maybe she loses this one, maybe she loses 1 or 2 more fights and then she retires. It's okay. We've seen that with other fighters. I mean, yes, John Jones still in his run, other than Khabib and George St. Pierre, who had to avenge losses, but George St. Pierre retired on top. Very few people get to do that. We saw DC end his career on 2 losses. We saw Anderson Silva lose a bunch of times. Jose Aldo lose a bunch of times. Like, I don't look at Anderson Silva any different. I look at him as, other than, I don't know, Tom Brady, everybody declines as they get older. Michael Jordan was not a great, like, he was good, but he wasn't great with the Wizards. Like, it happens. Like, they're human beings. So, yeah, I think it's all on Julianna Pena. Does she get viewed as Matt Serra gets viewed? We're like, oh, that was such a nice moment for you. Were you viewed for one moment? Yeah, I know she has the Ultimate Fighter too, but so does Matt Serra. But, like, you get viewed for one moment? Or do you get viewed like, remember when TJ Dillashaw beat Renan Barão? And then everyone still thought it was a fluke. Like, that was such a great night. And Renan Barão
and Dillashaw was an underdog in the rematch.
And then Dillashaw beat the shit out of him again. Like, the second time was just as bad as might have been worse. Actually, he stopped him the second time, didn't he? Oh, no, he stopped him both times. He stopped him earlier, I think.
No, it was even worse the second time. And honestly, it's funny you mentioned that. Some of the same narratives, because it was like, well, Barão was this unbeatable guy, but we always knew he had a terrible weight cut. And, Dillashaw just beat him with volume and pressure. Like, Barão comes back better. And,
nobody even thought Dillashaw should have got that time. There was somebody else. Somebody else was, like, in line at that time, but it was Dillashaw got it. No one thought he should have and all that stuff. That, like, this is all on Julianna Pena, in my opinion. I really think it is. So as far as a breakdown goes,
one last prediction question before you go into the breakdown.
Sure.
And this is something we'll discuss if we need to on the recap. If Julianna Pena loses on Saturday, does it at least have to be close for her to even get a trilogy, like a rubber match? Like, if Nunes just thrashes her, do they not even bother making the third fight?
I wasn't prepared to answer a question like that. I think so. I mean, at least she might eventually, because the division is not like Matt Serra never got the trilogy fight. 170 was so loaded. You had Matt Hughes waiting and Josh Koscheck and Jake Shields. There was like, who's waiting at 135?
Nobody.
Yeah. Like, I don't know if she gets an instant. I mean, if it's a close war.
I guess that's what I mean. Like, does she not get an instant one if this is just a beatdown?
Not if she gets blown out.
And then the question is, does she make it back before Nunes retires?
That's another tough question. How many more fights does Nunes have?
Yeah.
I'll say this. A lot of people said how motivated she was. I think Nunes is more motivated than people think. I mean, you're not going to go to the Ultimate Fighter show. You're not going to give up 6 weeks of your life doing that if you're not motivated. Or it's 6 weeks, 8 weeks, whatever it is. It's just, does she still have the skill? Now, Julianna Pena, she was always like a mediocre striker, but suddenly she stands in the pocket with the deadliest striker in the history of the sport, really maybe against any weight class, and she lands the better shots. Like, she didn't outstrike her, like dodging shots, countering. No, she stood in the pocket. Like the if you went into the last fight and you said, okay, you can't give Julianna Pena tons of advice, but you can give her one advice. Like, everyone's one advice would be like, hey, don't stand in the pocket and swing it out with the man it is. No, that's exactly what she did.
Watch the Cyborg fight and don't do that.
Yeah, don't swing it out with her. Like, that's the worst thing you do. Grind, maybe get a takedown, try to tire her out that way. But she showed a great chin, obviously an incredible heart, and I think it was a little bit of a mental thing. She was gaining confidence that she could eat the shots from Amanda Nunes. And Amanda Nunes, I think, was as tired she was. I think it was a little bit of a mental break. She's always bullied people, and they didn't go down. And I mean, everyone goes down, but she didn't go down. And when she got a takedown, she hasn't been in a tough position in God knows how long. Kat Zingano fight forever ago. And honestly, she tapped really quick. Like, the hook wasn't even in. I don't even know if I couldn't tell if the choke was even in. It was one of those ones. Now, I'm not saying Amanda Nunes is a quitter. I'm not saying Amanda Nunes is not mentally tough. You don't rise to be the greatest fighter in history. I'm just saying in this one moment, she kind of checked out a little bit, I think. Now, Julianna Pena wasn't avoiding shots. She was willing to eat a shot to land one of her own. I don't know if that's a good strategy in the second fight. I don't think she was hurting Pena as much as Pena was getting tired, and that kind of was buckling her a little bit. I still think Pena I'm sorry, Nunes. I was saying the back was. I don't think Nunes was getting hurt by Pena because of Pena's power. I think it was more of Nunes getting tired. Pena's hand speed is still a little bit of an issue for me. She is a minus athlete. But if she can close the distance, she can get in that clinch. It started before the exchanges in the pocket. There was some clinching at the end of the first round. She can get in there, grind, tire Nunes out, get to the body lock, look for some takedowns, get the fight to the ground any way possible. She could win a fight that way. I really think the cardio is the big. I mean, I'm not like going off on a limb here. I think most people are saying the cardio is the way to outwork her, out-tired her. I think the submission game of Julianna Pena is grossly overrated. She's a top-side grappler, but she struggled at times. Like, I mean, Nico Montano was taking her down, having success. She's been submitted in the past by Valentina Shevchenko. She was surprisingly submitted by Jermaine Durandamy, who's not known for a grappler. And I think that actually just her submission game is overrated. This was her first submission since she was on the Tough Show. So I think that's really being overplayed. Now, Amanda Nunes, obviously she's a kickboxer who's a really good athlete. Now, that's the big question mark. Is she still that really good athlete? Has she lost even a step at all? We don't know. She has some physical tools that she will never lose. The one big thing is that, like, long, like overly long frame, like overly long arms, very like Kamaru Usman type frame where she's longer than you think she is. She's quick. She throws tight inside shots. She has good variety of shots. She has a powerful jab. Like, there were some really good things Amanda Nunes did in their first fight. She dropped Pena with the first jab she threw. She has a deadly straight right. She has a deadly left hook. She can land power shots while being charged. She can. She has really good vision. She kind of sees what's coming at her. She's the hardest hitter in the history of the sport. She's got really good leg kicks. The first exchange they had, she dropped Pena with a calf kick. The first blow through, dropped it, knocked her right down. She obviously has that wicked high kick where she caught Holly Holm. She isn't a wizard on the ground. Like, Valentina Shevchenko is a much more well-rounded fighter than Amanda Nunes without the like earth-shattering power that Amanda Nunes has, but she can grapple a little bit. She gets takedown. She's a good topside grapple. She was winning the first round grappling exchanges against Julianna Pena. She has great takedown defense. Usually, I mean, Pena got a really weird takedown, but again, more tired than anything. And she's a black belt. I mean, so we don't see it a lot, but we saw it against Geronimine, like grappling. Big thing comes down to cardio. Is her cardio gone? I'm with you. Obviously, I was way more confident in Amanda Nunes the first fight than I am now, but I'm going to go with Nunes. I really think she should fight just like we just saw Jack Hermanson fight Chris Curtis, and I think Pena a little bit like Chris Curtis, where she's heavy in that front leg, plotting kind of person. I think Nunes should kind of stick and move. Don't load up any power shots. She was doing that a lot. Like, I think she kind of felt disrespected by Pena. Like, how dare you stand there? And I think she was trying to get a walk-off one shot because she kept winging her overhand right, just winging it, trying to end the fight with one shot. I think now, if I'm coaching her, I'm making Nunes chase her. I'm beating her to a spot, land the shot, get out of the way, kind of like a prime Joanna Jędrzejczyk used to do. She has a huge power advantage. She has the accuracy advantage. She has a speed advantage. She has the overall athleticism advantage. Just does she have the cardio advantage? I think if she gets the advice, like, remember when Trevor Whitman was cornering Justin Gaethje against Tony Ferguson, and Gaethje was open up, and he said, "Hey, stop trying to end him with one punch. Just touch him." I think he said something like, I think
70% or something.
70%, yeah, like 70%, 80%. If she just holds back her power just a little bit, just touches a little bit more, those 70, 80%, and then when the opening presents itself, she's still even 70% punches from Amanda Nunes is like everybody else in the division is 100%, maybe not even.
Mm-hmm.
I think she eventually finds the finish with a big blow, and I think she drops Pena after. I think she batters Pena for a couple rounds and then puts her out. I'm not going to go as confident go first round. I actually think she might make a statement again a little later round. I think she beats her up and finishes her in I'll say beginning of the third round. Nunes by TKO.
All right. The round in question does vary, but both Schillen and Duffy are calling for Amanda Nunes to get her lost hardware back via TKO in the rematch with Julianna Pena. That has been the Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC 277. I have been Ben Duffy. He has been Keith Schillen. If you're joining us for the first time, first of all, thank you. We hope you enjoyed it. Please, by all means, do like, subscribe, leave a comment in the comment section. It is Keith and I reading and responding to those. We'd love to hear from you. If you think we're way off base about any of these picks, let us know. We'll see how it ages. We're both big enough men. Yeah, post your picks.
Anybody goes like 13-0, like we'll throw it on the recap. We'll give you the props.
Oh yeah, we'll give you props, and we're both man enough to admit when we're wrong, which on some cards is frequently. Last week we both did great. We'll see about this week, but most importantly, join us on the recap. We do a Sherdog Radio recap on the Sherdog YouTube page. It'll be it's usually about 15 minutes after the main event. It is usually both of us going live, talking about all these fights, what's good, what was bad, what was controversial, always something. The live chat is wide open during those recaps, so we are taking your comments, your questions, your reactions in real time. Usually a lot of humor going on there. There's usually something to laugh about that happened in the cage. It is usually both of us. Like I said, this coming week, it won't be. It is Keith with a mystery special guest to be revealed, because on the night that a UFC pay-per-view is happening in Dallas, I'm going to be in Austin, probably playing the guitar for like 15 people. But that's my problem. I got to keep some hobbies. Between now and then, thank you for watching. Enjoy the rest of your week. And by all means, enjoy the fights.
Take a half second, hit like.
Yeah, take a half second, hit like.